made that comment. A bunch of people also were like, that's a really good point. I think of all the books that I read in school, most of it by men. That's probably not fair. Then one dude raised his hand and he was like, look, I know that sounds nice. I know that feels good in a way. But I think if we really look at the truth, which is the family proclamation to the world, women have their place.
Give us a cutesy little Mormon-related bit, Mr. Comedy Church.
I do baptisms at the temple for my haters because they're dead to me. That's my Mormon.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Carah Burrell. Sometimes I go by Nuancehoe. Welcome to my brand new season of the Mormon History Hoedown, where I talk about all things relating to Mormonism. They're funny, there's history, but today I have a very special guest joining me, comedian Adam Broud.
Hello, I'm Adam Broud.
If you guys want to know what you're in for today, Adam is famous for Comedy Church, for performing all over the country, for doing stuff with Improv Broadway and Don't Tell Comedy, and also famous for being my friend and meeting Maria Bamford with me last week.
Yeah, that was so fun.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
So if you guys have seen anything by Comedy Church around the internet, that's
me.
Adam's baby.
Yeah.
So
Adam Broud, sometimes go by Outright Hoe. I'm trying to do my own branding for it instead.
Outright.
Yeah.
You're stealing my alter ego. Anyone ever sees my alternative account, it's called Brazen Prude for Christ.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So I'm so grateful that Adam's here in the studio with me, and we're going to just tell some funny stories, go over his life, and just kind of shoot the shit, because that's what is going to be fun for us to do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I will say that is probably one of the strongest starts to a friendship I've ever had, that it was like, hey, it's so good to meet you in person. This is so nice. Let's go have lunch with a celebrity, a comedian who we both respect so much.
Yeah.
It's fun.
With Maria Bamford last week. So if you guys don't know, I've been taking a little bit of a break from podcasting and YouTubing to do some stuff in my personal life and moving and so forth. And I thought, well, I'm doing all this, I just want to get back into stand-up. I want to get back into writing more comedy, and reached out to you. And we went out to lunch, and it's just been a fun friendship ever since. Went to Comedy Church last week, laughed so hard, had the best time. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, I'll leave the links down below. If you live in Utah, especially, please come out to a Comedy Church show. It's
so fun.
If I did exactly what I want to do in life is what I would do that.
Oh, that makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
It really is so fun. I have such a good time doing it. Yeah.
Go ahead and describe for the audience, what is Comedy Church and how can people follow you and how can they go attend a show? Because they have to.
Yeah. Comedy Church it's a fake church, real stand-up show for mostly ex-religious people. We have people who are currently religious who come sometimes, people who are a bit more nuanced, who are like, oh yeah, I don't like the cultural part of it. But I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's just we do a different theme every single time, and we don't repeat a theme more than once a year. So if you come to a show, you can come to a couple of them and stuff like that. I host it with one of my closest friends, Greg Kite, and he's a ex-evangelical. I'm ex-Mormon. And so, yeah, we just kind of talk about our experiences, and then we have stand-up comedians come on. They'll do their time, and then we interview them about their spiritual past or present beliefs, and then we talk a bit about whatever the theme is. And the theme can be stuff like shame, or we used to do a Pioneers show. We're going to switch that this year for patriotism and see how that goes. But yeah, this last one was Christmas. We've got an Easter show, but it's all just different stuff every single time. It was so fun.
Yeah. And you say that you write new material and you tell new jokes. You don't repeat jokes.
Yeah, no. Yep. It's brand new jokes every single time, which has been really good. I mean, as far as comedy stuff goes, to have a show that's okay, every 2 weeks you have to have 15 minutes of brand new material that isn't repeated from anything else, is set to a certain theme, and then has to be so good that you can open a show with it, has been probably the best thing for my comedy, to be honest, where it just made me and forced me to write everything. Because I would hate Comedy Church as well. This is what scared me at first when I started it. I was like, but what if I write 15 minutes of material And it's the worst part of the show because everyone else is performing their best material for the show, right?
Yeah.
Because we invite people to come on and we're like, yeah, do 8 to 10. So people perform their best 8 to 10 minutes. And I'm like, that would be a really sucky show if you're like, oh, the show is so fun. It's so good outside of the host. Like, it's like, oh no.
Not even close.
Yeah. So it's been really good and like a good challenge where it's like, I need 15 as best as I've got minutes every single time to start off the show. And it's so fun. It's just so fun.
Like once a month.
Yeah, twice a month.
Twice a month.
Yeah, we do one show in Salt Lake and we do one in Harriman right now. And then sometimes more if we travel. So like in February, for instance, we're going to Phoenix and we're going to San Diego. We're going down to St. George. And then in March, we're out in Dallas. So it's kind of traveling a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone listening, if you live in any of those areas, I'm serious. It doesn't matter if you're even like ex-religious. People who are religious probably come out to the show too.
Yeah, they really do. And people who've never been religious. Like we do a good job where it's not like a bunch of inside jokes. We try not to do that. Like a lot of it's explained and stuff. Utah sometimes gets a little more inside jokey. When we travel, it's much less so. We make sure that everybody can enjoy it. So,
yeah. I'm doing a callback now to something that's an inside joke from the show that I was just at. But it was great because the thing about which apostle fucks the best was a bit that I don't even remember how it came about, but it was a good callback for the entire thing, and everyone was like howling with laughter. And we were like, Uchtdor.
Yeah, very fun that everyone all at once was like, Uchtdor for sure.
Yeah,
that was great.
But what did you say about Bednar? You're like, I think he's a little bit more of like a rule follower.
Yeah. Well, he's just like, he always strikes me as the most autistic of all of them. I'm like, if his fixation is the clit, it's gotta be him at that point. Like, it's gotta be. But I think we all know that's not his fixation in that way. Mm-hmm. It's a fixation in a different way for him.
Yeah, but if that's what got him into the social kingdom, he'd probably figure it out.
He'd figure it out. Yeah. He'd go all in.
Yeah. So Comedy Church is hilarious. I'm so glad that you're doing that. That's exactly what like our community needs. That's what people need, is like a fun place to unwind and laugh about stuff like that. I'm so glad you're doing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have a lot of fun with it, mostly because, I feel like a lot of people after leaving whatever religion you're a part of, there's like a space where at first you're like doing the whole deconstruction bit and you're like, I just need information. And everyone's like reading and like doing the research. And then after that, you've read enough that you're like, oh, I'm furious. And so you like look for places where it's like, who will word those feelings back to me and like help me feel like, oh yeah, I have the right and I have the reason to be mad. Mm-hmm. But then I feel like right after that, there's not a whole lot of places to go, because I feel like a lot of people reach a space where they're like, I'm not angry anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, obviously, but I've kind of moved on and it's just something that was part of my past. And I feel like that's the space we kind of fulfill.
Thank you so much for including my YouTube channel in that.
You as well.
I'm just,
where it's just like, we're not looking to be angry. It's not like a trauma fest or anything like that. It's just like, hey, we all speak this language. Because I always hate, I don't know if you feel this way. I always hate when people say things where they're like, can't you just move on? And I'm like, I mean, in a way, I think I have moved on, but it would also be silly to ignore something that was so much a part of my life for 30 years. Like, that's what comedy is talking about yourself on stage.
Tragedy plus time equals comedy.
Yeah. In the same way that I'm like, I mean, I talk about old jobs on stage. I talk about places I've lived on stage. I talk about school on stage. I'm not doing any of those things either. It feels really weird if I was like, but I'd never talk about the thing that occupied all my anxieties for 30 plus years, So I think it's like a good, I feel like we fill this space for people where it's like, I'm not necessarily angry, but I don't want to like not talk about my life. So now that it's just a thing, can't we just like laugh about it a bit? And and it's so fun.
And you do a great job, especially with taking stories and things from your own life, so it doesn't feel like you're punching down at somebody else. And it's like the things that we did when we were Mormon and the ways that we used to believe, and hear some new concepts and ways to think about it.
Yeah. It kind of warms my heart how many Mormons actually come in and they're like, I'm Mormon and this is funny. And like, yeah, because I'm not trying to like get at you, you know, I'm just trying to be like, I was dumb in this moment. And obviously there's an implication that it's like, and if you do this, you're also kind of dumb. But I mean, hard to argue with a person who's like, no, I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm saying we're idiots. It's like a little more palatable for people.
Yeah. And on that same note, I mean, I have people tell me about how comedy kind of is the lubricant to that they might not have like listened to what I had to say before, but because I presented it in a funny way with satire or something, that's I've had lunches with Mormon apologists before where they've told me that, like,
oh, really?
That like I normally wouldn't listen to you, but at least like you're making me laugh. And I'm like, oh, that's the way you do it. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So kind of in your experience overall in your life, I'm just curious to hear how you've seen comedy kind of be an instrument to get people to laugh and also listen.
Yeah. So when we first started recording our shows and like putting content out there, I felt like a comment that would come up. I felt like a comment that would come up quite a bit is someone would say something to the effect of like, this is funny, but it's also true. And then they would add some sort of like flavor to it where it's like, this will make people like rethink their faith or something like that. And I always would comment back where I'm like, if I told a joke good enough that it kills God for you, I think you got to have better faith at the least. Like, I don't think that's like a compliment to me so much as it's an indictment to your own beliefs a little bit, where it's like, I had all this hope and then one guy told a joke. It can maybe make you think, but I don't think there's a joke good enough to destroy God, I would hope. So it's I think it does absolutely open up the door for people to be like, oh yeah, I didn't think of things that way before, which I think is really good. The flip side of that is, yeah, if I ever had anybody come up to me and they're like, did you know I deconverted because of your bit? I'd be like, oh no, sweetie, you were out. I promise you didn't know it. You were gone.
Yeah.
And then you heard my joke. I promise that's how it happened.
I was trying to hold on to Packer being the best one who I forgot to mention this isn't going to be a more R-rated podcast, apparently.
I was so faithful. And then this man made me contemplate how good Packer fucks. And as soon as that happened,
I don't want to say it, but yeah.
It would be fun. I would love for him to, if he was still alive, him to narrate a smut book. That would be so fun. And her arms were wrapped around me. That would be beautiful.
Have you ever performed stand-up that you would normally perform in a club, but instead did your same routine for a crowd of Mormons?
Yeah, just recently.
And how did it go?
Just recently, even. I mean, I try to be pretty judicious in terms of like...
I want to hear the traumatic stories. I want to hear you getting kicked out for saying the word butt or something.
Oh, fun. Well, the first story that comes to mind is unfortunately going to go the opposite direction in the sense of...
You're made prophet?
Yeah. Seer and revelator. No, have you ever heard... I think... I saw it through Anthony Jeselnik talking about Andy Warhol, saying that something about like art is about getting away with it. Have you ever seen that clip or talked about it?
Yeah. Something about being an asshole. It's about getting away with it.
Yes. Yeah. Love that perspective. That applies to Mormons as well. They love to feel like they're getting away with something. So I did a show for a Mormon ward. It was their Halloween party not too long ago, around Halloween. Anyway, so I've got this joke that's all about how you're not allowed to say Mormon anymore. But you know that like camp song where it's like, I know a Mormon boy, he is my pride and joy.
Mormon. I know who he is. Yep.
So my joke is I sing that song. In Comedy Torch, I just say Mormon. What I did for them is I was like, so we're not allowed to say anymore, right? We're not allowed to call ourselves right? We can't say which was fun in and of itself. And then I was like, which makes it hard because, you know, there's like camp songs, like for instance, and I sing the whole song. I'm like, I know a boy, he is my pride and joy. Sing the whole thing. And then I say, yeah, I don't know if you're allowed to sing that song anymore. I've got my own rendition. Please, everybody sing along instead. And I go, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know a boy who's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He is my pride and joy of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I do the whole song that way. Big finale is at the end of that song, of course, you go like, Moremen, more men, sing it again. And so at mine, I have to go THECHURCHESUSCHOFJESUSCHRISTER-DAYSAINTS. Sing it again. And so that's like my whole thing. Anyway, I've done it for ex-Mormons. Goes over really well. I was nervous because I haven't been Mormon in a long time. And I know some people take the Mormon thing very seriously, where they're like, that's like calling us the N-word, right? And I'm like, I don't think it is. John Mulaney, if one word has to be described as the N-word.
It's the worst word, yeah.
Yeah. So there's some people who take it that way. So I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to give it a shot, because you play too safe and people are like, man, this is funny, but whatever. Everyone loves to feel like they get away with it. There were people who came up to me after that show and they were like, oh my gosh, your camp song, so good. And it was very fun for me, where I was like, I did feel in that moment, I was like, I think if you knew that I was ex-Mormon, you'd take a little bit of offense. But because I played it off as like, I'm not going to say either way, you felt like you got away with something in the church. So fun. So fun. So yeah, which I'm very proud of as well, because I'm like, I want everyone to have a good time. I don't, well, not everybody, but anytime I perform, I hope that it's good in the sense that at least most people, some people will get upset about stuff, like that's okay. But for the most part, I want to put on a good show, and that felt good, where I was like, it's fun that we all just felt like we got away with a little bit of something.
Yeah,
just now.
That's a really good perspective. And I hope any aspiring comedians listening to this, mostly me, will take that to heart.
Yeah. It was fun. I can't think of too much where, I did have I did some stand-up for a young single adult ward one time, where I gave, what was it? I've got a joke where I say, a friend of mine asked me why Christians get married so young, and I say, I didn't know what to say, and so I just said, sometimes abstinence makes a heart grow fondler. I did that joke for a party for a young single adult ward, and it was very clear many of them laughed, and then they all like kind of looked at each other, and a few people like looked back at the bishop, and I was like, oh no, this is a joke to me, but y'all are living it right now.
Yeah.
Where it was basically the equivalent of my joke just being like, so how you're all touching each other?
Right.
Like sort of thing. Yeah. And they were all like, and I was like, oh shit. Okay. My bad for not reading the room.
Yeah.
You are the butt of that joke. I can understand why it didn't go over well. And that was like that. To this day, I say that was one of my worst shows ever, because it like killed the mood. And I told a couple other like one-liners, and it was just clear that they were like, they also seemed so tense because they were inside a church, and they had just blessed my jokes that they would be funny.
Yeah.
Which is the craziest thing that has happened so many times to me. But it was definitely a show where I didn't get away with it. They didn't get away with it.
Yeah.
I tried so much. I tried like going beyond the boundary. I've got another joke where I say like, I'm starting my own church. It's a church of math. And I should have just stopped there, because even just saying I'm starting my own church, you could feel everybody's assholes just pucker up. Where they're like,
people don't start churches, they restore churches. And there's only one that's ever been restored. This is true. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like literally they're all like talking about starting a new church. And I mean, the joke doesn't end any better. Like the joke is, it's a church of math. You don't have to be circumcised to join, but it does require schlong division. So it's a dick joke to begin with. But it was this whole thing where
you told that in church?
In a church. Ooh. But I was opening for someone else, and to open, like your whole job is to test boundaries, I think, where it's like, how far can I take it? And I think if I'm a good host, I should take it a little too far. Like I should find the informed boundary for the next guy, so that they can go up and they can walk to that line. I think that's the mark of a good comedian. Bad comedian is going past that line and like staying there, and then the whole crowd becomes uncomfortable. Don't think you should do that, but I do think you should find the line. And the best way to find the line is just putting a toe past it. So anyway, I don't necessarily feel bad, because I'm like, well, that's part of my job. And that joke was clear that I was like,
putting a schlong past it.
Yes. Just like 3 inches or something. Anyway, but I clearly did. And it was bad because the abstinence joke, I was like, was that too tame? Was that too much? And I hadn't been doing comedy long enough to quite tell, I think, at that point. And so I was like, I guess I'll take it farther and see. So it was very much so a mistake where it was like, he went too far. Oh my God, he's still going, sort of situation. So they were all just like not having the rest of the show. And it's one of the few shows that I've like bombed and didn't stick around. I'm usually the type of person where I'm like, nah, man, this is the job. You bomb, you look people in the eye, and you say, thank you for coming. And you allow them to tell you, hey, dude, you suck. And you say, I know. And then you walk away. But I like bailed, and I immediately ran to an open mic And the person hosting it was a friend. And I was like, can I go on first? Because I feel so much anxiety right now of having bombed so hard, probably the worst show I've ever had in my life. Can I just get on stage immediately to like wash my hands of that? And he was like, of course. And it felt really good because my whole set was just, he did his set and then I jumped up and I was like, so I just had the worst show of my life and it's not my fault. Here's why. And it was so fun because then that whole set became just like this meta. I did the same jokes and it was just meta commentary where I was like, this is who I perform with. None of them laughed. Here's why they didn't laugh. Here's why I was terrible that I did this.
Yeah.
And I just broke it down. So I got to be like, abstinence makes art grow fondler. Everyone laughed at the joke. And I'm like, and they didn't like that. And now in retrospect, of course they don't like that because abstinent makes the heart grow fondler. And that's what they're all doing to each other and stuff like that. So it made for a really great next set. But yeah, it was just like blank stares, sadness. There was one guy laughing and I like told him, I was like, you're my ally. And he literally went, don't do that. And I was like, oh no. Even the one guy was like, I'm laughing against my will. I don't want any of this.
Oh my God.
Thing. But yeah, it was the worst.
When you're blessing or when your jokes are being blessed, it just does not set the mood for comedy.
That being said, my buddy who went on right after me, he has told me many times, he's like, that night was the best show that he's ever done in his life.
What?
I'm like, I hope that I had something to do with that, but my guess would be the only thing I did was provide relief for them, that they were like, thank God this guy knows what he's doing, because that last guy, Jesus, sort of thing. Obviously,
were the lights on like full blast in the cultural hall?
Not quite that bad, but I could definitely look everybody in the eyes. Which, well, I'll be honest, that's most of the shows that I do. Like, I do a lot more bar shows and like travel shows that are in the middle of nowhere where it's like a repurposed, some sort of like, Elks Lodge sort of place or whatever. Like, I do a lot of those shows. So I'm used to like looking people in the eyes.
But you've never had to perform for like your own ward that you attended, I'm guessing, for like a Christmas party.
No, I've always said
because me and Aaron had to do that, and it was uncomfortable, and I did not like it. I did not want it, because you don't even move into a new ward and tell people that you're a comedian. Like when we lived in LA for 3 years, and everyone's like, "Oh, you should perform." We spent 3 years dodging that ball to be like, "No, we're not performing at the Christmas party. All for Aaron to sign us up."
You know,
and it was terrible.
The quickest thing to shut it down, I always just ask people, "Oh yeah, what do you want to pay me?" And then they laugh, and then I laugh, and then we go our separate ways. Literally every time where I've had that happen with coworkers. I have that happen, always, when they're like, oh my gosh, we got a thing, and we got you in house, so I guess we don't need to book anyone. We can just have you be the comedian. And I'm like, for sure. You just got to pay me like another $3,000 and I'll do it. And then they're like, can you imagine? I'm like, yeah, can you imagine if I performed for you guys? So glad I won't.
Do you know Maria Bamford's joke about that?
No.
Since we're new close friends with Maria Bamford, we met her and went out to lunch last week.
I mean, we do have her number.
She has one of my favorite jokes of all time, where she talks about how the University of Minnesota like wanted to book her for the graduation speech.
Oh.
And when they discussed payment, it was like nothing. And she's like, what is this? She has a whole funny way of describing it.
Love that.
But she's like, so you're telling me that the university in which I paid to learn how to do the thing that I make money doing isn't going to pay me that I paid them to teach me how to do.
Yeah.
And she says it more clever than that. But basically, it's like a word salad that's so funny.
But I still love that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, we performed in LA once for our Christmas party. Full blast lights, old ladies all up front. And all my favorite jokes were just a little bit too edgy. And I wasn't even allowed to tell them. So I had to go with my least favorite material. But then you have to go to church with these people afterwards.
Yeah, I think
people like, this is not fun.
People don't understand that like one of the benefits of comedy is a bit of like the anonymity. You never have to see this person again. And the benefits of the comedy club is people around you have no attachment to, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Which is why corporate events are so hard, where it's like, I got to write jokes that are so good that this person feels comfortable, or that this person has a visceral reaction to them while sitting next to their HR manager.
Yeah.
While at the same time telling a joke that's like tame enough that no one feels like they can't laugh about it while sitting next to their HR manager. Like, it's a real tough tightrope, and it's made that much harder when you've got people who are like, you tell a story that's a joke and people are like, oh, I didn't know that about Adam Broud. And it's like, You're not supposed to know that or not know that.
Yeah.
That's just supposed to inform the punchline.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. But that's like all people can do when they know you. They're like, really? That's so fascinating. It's like, not supposed to be fascinating.
Yeah. Do you know how often I've wanted to take stuff that I've written in the last month as stand-up that I expect to only tell at a dark club where if somebody recognizes me from the internet, that's fine. Yeah. But I can't say that joke as a TikTok or as a tweet or something because it's not true. It's not representative. Yeah. But people are going to think that I'm like talking about an orgy that I was at.
Yeah.
And that may or not be true, you know. Just like you have to come to my stand-up shows to find out.
But. Oh, literally. The amount of friends who I have like told a joke to and they're like, you did what? And I'm like, no. Obviously I didn't. Like my most recent favorite joke that I wrote that I can't even tell because I think it's like too niche to the point that I like forget the word is what is it called? Tryptophobia. Do you know what that is? I think I'm saying it right. It's like a fear of like holes usually that are like close together and stuff. I'm pretty sure it's called tryptophobia. But if you Google it, a lot of times it'll show like sporous flowers and stuff like that have like a bunch of holes in them and it creeps people out. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
I have that. That's why I don't go to orgies. That's a joke. Go on.
That's my joke.
Is it?
Yeah, where I said, I'm sorry, I can't come to the orgy. I have tryptophobia.
Oh, damn it. Okay, well, I just totally walked right into that.
It was a perfect Venn diagram where you mentioned orgies, and I was like, that reminds me of my favorite joke. So
we Venn diagrammed the shit out of that.
Yeah. But it is also a joke that I can never tell because I can't, from nothing, go up there and be like, I can't go to orgies because I have tryptophobia. Because people will be like, what's tryptophobia? Then I have to explain it. And then the joke's not funny anymore. Blah, 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 blah.
I think genius Adam Broud could think of a way to make it happen.
I've been trying. Anyway, I have a plan. I still don't think it'll work, but I'm going to give it a shot. But we'll see. Because I really like the joke, mostly because I think that's the funniest reason not to go to an orgy. Just looking around and be like, too many. It's fun. Yeah. In all of them? Anyway. I think that's fun.
In all of those everyone has how many? Whoa! The room starts spinning.
Yeah.
So we have a captive, probably ex-Mormon audience right now. What is your favorite like bit story from any of your time where people will come out to a comedy church show because they're like, I want to see more of that guy. Give us a cutesy little Mormon related bit, Mr. Comedy Church.
Here's my one-liner.
Okay.
I do baptisms at the temple for my haters because they're dead to me. That's my Mormon.
Wait, I need to laugh more. No, that was a real laugh because you're about to move on, but I'm going to be laughing into the microphone. I still need to laugh. Let me repeat it again. I do baptisms for my haters.
I do baptisms at the temple for my haters because they're dead to me. That's the joke. Which
Clever.
I do love performing that joke for active Mormons. They really like that one, which is fun. And man, that is a tough. Anyway, one comic to another. That joke legit took writing to like figure it out. Because the more natural way to say that would be, I do baptisms for the dead at the temple for my haters because they're dead to me. But then you're saying dead twice.
No, yeah.
So I have to take out dead the first time so that it works the second time. But then I had to like build it all in so people know it's baptism. It took a lot of work. Anyway, I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
The brief story that I'll tell, I won't tell the stand-up version of it, but I think this is like a good taste for like what comedy church is nuts and bolts of it is when I was prepping for my mission. I was like 18 years old at that point. I'd moved out of my home. And I mean, what I say in stand-up is when I was 18 years old, there were two truths about me. One, that I, without a doubt, knew that my Heavenly Father lived, that Jesus Christ died for my sins, and I loved them, and they loved me, and that the gospel was true, and the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints was the gospel restored on earth. And the second thing that was also true about me is I was horny as fuck. I was the horniest 18-year-old. These two things, two wolves were inside me battling at all times. One that was like, get on your knees and repent, and the other one that was like, get on your knees. Nice. So those were like the two things always happening. Anyway, 18 years old, I'd moved to a new city. There was a 18 and up strip club down the street from me called Jiggles. And Jiggles was not a quality establishment, if anyone's curious. It is a place that you look at and you're like, I'm going to get sticky just looking at that place. Disgusting, vile place. Anyway, it couldn't get out of my brain. And so one day I like broke down and I finally was like, I have to see what's jiggling. And so I went over and I showed up early because I'm polite. And I walked in, bottom level of Jiggles was a porn shop. And by instinct, I like diverted my eyes from everything because you're not supposed to look at pornography. And I was like, I'm not looking at this. I'm headed to the strip club. And so anyway, I like looked away, went upstairs, was there early, was waiting for the show. I was so nervous. I was terrified, but I was so excited. I was like, this is the first time strip club. This is wrong. I'm going on a mission, but I can't not think about it. Anyway, sat there for a while. It was just me in the audience and then these two girls up front. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Girls who are here for a strip club. That's nuts. Kept waiting. Saw like this dude kind of like peek out from the back. And I was like, well, what's the bouncer looking for? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he looks through the back. Another dude like walks in the back. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm here to see boobs. Those two girls are here to see boobs. All these like hunky men who keep walking around, they're here to see boobs. Super excited. Wait a sec. Why are there so many hunky men? That was when the guy who was announcing the show goes, welcome to the stage, Big Dick Dave. And this dude comes out. Turns out I was there first time ever trying to go to a strip club. And I went on gay and ladies night. And I immediately was like, no, like stood up, rushed out. And this was my favorite part. I was rushing out and they go, where are you going? Like someone shouted, like, where are you going? And I was like, I didn't mean to come here. And the guy on the mic goes, but you showed up early, which is so funny to me. And I was like, no, I didn't. I don't know. And I like rushed down, went downstairs and went to my car. And in that moment, I literally was thinking like, you know what? That was God. That was God helping me and teaching me that I shouldn't be in places like this. He was saving me from seeing obscene things and women dancing and encouraging me to go on my mission, or he was trying to turn me gay. One of the two. I'm not sure which was which. So there you go. Anyway, so that's like a story that I really like a lot. Yeah. I think it's so fun. I wrote it into
I cannot believe it's real.
I wrote it into a pilot even with my buddy Daniel Spencer for the show we wrote called Less Actives about 3 Mormon kids at BYU. And it's such a fun story to just accidentally show up trying to like hold to the iron rod and then a different iron rod is provided for you. So it's just, anyway.
And if whatever your sexuality is, I have no idea, but if it ever changes from what I assume that it is, married to your lovely wife that I met the other day, I will use this story against you to be like, oh, you did show up early. Did you?
Did show interesting.
Interesting.
No.
That was a joke?
Just had to be.
It was for material, was it?
So interesting.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm going to be a comedian. This is for material, actually. Yeah. Funny. We're all laughing real hard, Adam. Sure.
Yeah. No, but it legit. Oh, it's so fun to me.
Because you couldn't read the poster.
There was no indication. It was just like, here's the times. Here it is. I didn't see anything that said anything. I think I did have blinders on a little bit as well, where I was just like, don't look at anything or anyone. You're not supposed to do this.
You were walking in like this, huh?
I literally did avert my eyes, but I was like, wow. Oh, I was so terrified. I was terrified to the point that I didn't even like Google what time the place opened on my computer. I Googled it on my roommate's computer and then deleted the search history on his computer just in case it tracked back to mine, which is a despicable and weird thing to do. But yeah, it was fun.
Well,
fun past.
I'm glad you're out of the church now and you can go to as many types of strip clubs as you wish.
Oh boy. And do I? No, I do not. So there you go.
Nope. But the world is absolutely at your fingertips or whatever else you use. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're up to.
It is so fun for me, I think, that story, because of how like rules follower, like I said, and then it was just a moment of weakness that I was like, I can't keep it in. It was fun. It's fun. Thwarted by a penis. Who among us? Who among us?
Who among us is not? I feel like there's a hung us joke or rhyme in there. I feel like you could figure it out.
Who hung us? I think that's good enough.
Yeah, there you go. I'm want to get into a little bit of your deconstruction story. If you feel like the church overall in your life before you're deconstructed, if they were like positive towards your comedic sensibilities, or if you feel like the culture of the church was just never going to make sense for you, even if you thought that it was true from just like the type of jokey personality that you have.
Yeah, I think it all depended on like where I was for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've got stories where it's like the church being in the church gave me so many opportunities to become the theater kid that I am today. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I gave the talks, I did the road shows.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All that sort of stuff, where it did put me in a space where it's like, hey, this is good to do as well, which I actually think is very cool in Mormonism to this day, that for as much as like, I'm going to adopt my old Mormon language, as much as the world wants you to believe that like performance as an art is like not a manly pursuit a lot of times, I think, where it's like musical theater, are you gay sort of like attitude that people take on.
Oh, yeah. Or I was also going to say just like, it's not going to provide for your family.
Yeah, I think that's very much so in the church, that sort of stuff. But I am impressed how well Mormonism has maintained this thing where it's like, what? No, performance? That's just that's a thing to do. Like I don't feel like there's like a gendered expectation about it. Like the road show, I didn't feel as if there was this pushback where it's like, whoa, performing on a stage, that's kind of like for the girls, don't you think? The way that in high school, I kind of got that and stuff like that. So I think the positive for the church was it gave me these opportunities to perform, and it gave a lot of positive reinforcement for like, do the road shows, do these things, be in the talent show. That's actually really good and cool. Downside would be, I don't know, the lack of joy that I think the church ever has. Do you remember that there was like a general conference way back where people started cheering for temples? Do you remember that at all?
When they would announce temples?
Yeah.
And then they told him to knock it off?
Yes. It was like when Nelson first became a prophet. I think it was like his first general conference leading or something. He was announcing and people were like, woo, and all this stuff. And then the next general conference, they said something where it was basically like true joy is experienced in silence, sort of like attitude. And I was like, that's
a joke. That's funny.
Yeah. I was just like, what is wrong with this church that we can't even handle being like the thing that we're supposed to be so celebratory towards, we're excited for. And they're like, no, not at all. And so that was really painful. To like see those moments where I'm like, how do you keep saying true joy and then you never allow yourself to experience it? And I felt that with talks and stuff. I felt like I was always like very, very, I felt like I would split the audience every time I told a talk. I felt like where I always would have people come up to me and be like, can I get a copy of your talk? Which I was like, oh, that means so much. And I would also have the last talk I ever gave in church, there was a high councilman who someone had to tell me later. They were like, did you know he stood up during your talk maybe 5 times as though he was going to pull you off the stage? I was like, really?
What were you saying? Do the bit.
Here's the bit. So I will say I was already like mentally out anyway at this point, but I wanted it.
This is in high school?
No, I stayed until I was like 30. So I was probably like 27, 28, something like that. And so I was asked to give a talk on Christ-like surface is what it was. And my take, right? So we're comedians. You got to have a take. You can't just speak to the thing. You got to have a unique.
Thank you so much for including me in that.
Of course. I
failed a comedy competition over the weekend. I'm a little bitter about it.
I do look forward to the day that I include you as the we and you don't see it as like an extra special thing. You're already there. Maria Bamford.
Yeah.
You're a comedian.
It's because I've been in comedy circles so much and I know what a crappy comedian is and I know that I am still one and I'm not where I need to be yet. Go on. So you gave a talk.
So I gave a talk, Christ-like surface. And so the first thing I said is I was like, they asked me to talk about Christ-like service. That being said, I'm not good at Christ-like service. So I'm going to speak to what I'm good at. So what I have is 7 excuses you can always give yourself that will not only get you out of performing Christ-like service, you will still get that same dopamine rush and belief that you're a good person. So that's what I'm going to provide for you today. It was good. It was very like tongue in cheek, where it was stuff where I remember I said things where it was like, here's one of the things you can do. Anytime someone invites you to do service now, don't do it now, but always tell yourself you'll do it later. Like, for instance, sometimes people say things like, oh, when I have enough money, I'm going to set up an account and that account will be filled with money that I can just like give away to people when they're in special times of need. And the great thing is you will never need to set up that account because no one ever has enough money. So you never need to set up that account, but you will always still feel like a good person because you'll be like, ugh, future me, so good. That's such a good person to be that future me that I want to. So it was stuff like that where obviously like, what am I saying outright, I'm convincing people how they cannot give service. But obviously the implicit message was just me like calling us all out on our bullshit.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you can't do that. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
To always do it in the future means you're never serving your fellow man. So like, you got to kind of bite the bullet and just do it now, even when it's inconvenient. So that was the true messaging. People who got that liked it. People who took the words for what they were like, so did you just try to convince us not to do service work? I was like, kind of, I guess. I don't know.
Did you ever like at the end be like, obviously now I am joking. I am a jokester who says things that are humorous.
No, because it's more fun to be a
explain the joke. Yeah, okay.
It's more fun to just have people be like, did you mean that? 100%.
Oh my gosh.
Also, I mean, the whole thing was, I kept pointing back at me. I was like, oh, I've done this so many times. And as soon as I say it, the flood of just euphoria that comes over me as I pretend that I'm a good person. Mm-hmm. Wonderful to feel.
I put my hand in front of my eyes during R-rated movies and go like this with their fingers open and only see
you know what
portions of the titties.
What was the movie Oppenheimer, where Florence Pugh had like a couple nudie scenes in it? Did you see it?
No. Check it out.
No, you should check it out. Mm-hmm. The dude sitting right next to me literally kept doing that. He kept doing this thing where she would pop up naked and he would be like, oh. And he would groan like that, like audibly, so that everyone knew around him. Yeah. Like, I don't want to see this.
Mm-hmm.
But coming from the point of view where I'm like, I've sat in movies and I have diverted my eyes because I don't want to see it or don't want to be caught wanting to see it, whichever one. You can tell when like the scene changes because the lighting changes and all that. So he kept doing this thing where she would pop up naked and he'd be like, ugh, still, ugh, how long is this? And he kept like looking back up and trying to pretend as if it was like, I didn't even think. Who would have known there were still beautiful titties on the screen? Who would have thought? So I think it was beautiful to
yeah. Don't you just love people who have to perform their righteousness for all to hear? Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to be like, you can just look, dude. No one cares. No one cares. Your wife might care, but you, at the very least, lean over to her and be like, I want this. Like, watch. Like, be honest. Just
Did you say
honest.
I want this?
I want this. And start watching. Why not?
Flashbacks to like Mormon marriages leading over and being like, yeah, that perfect. That's in my journal entry. I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, I actually only like sexual experiences when it's in one specific circumstance, and that's it. Like, it's such a crazy lie. I just watch. It's great. It's a good movie.
Take notes. That's so funny. So you're in church and you're doing your silly thing.
Yeah.
But it's not so well received. So
yeah, it all kind of depended, I felt like. And I felt, the closer I got to like breaking, the more that I did it. Mostly because I was the type of person, I like set up a checklist basically before I left the church, where I was like, I don't think this is true anymore, but I do think it will haunt me if I don't do all the things to make sure that I did my part in trying to make sure that it was true, if that makes sense. And so like some of those things were things like in Elders Quorum when we would talk about the nature of God. And I would outright say things like, I don't think I believe in God most days. Like, it's extremely hard for me. This was a real thing that was said. One time someone spoke up in Elders Quorum and they said something to the effect of, God doesn't ask for you to try to have faith. God asks for you to have faith. For you to attempt at faith is not enough. You must have it. And which is, to me, rings as one of those things that people say in general conference that everyone's like, that's really profound and interesting. And then it's like, can you try thinking about that for 2 more seconds? And then people are like, okay, yeah, I guess that is a weird thing to say, actually. And so anyway, so this person said that, and everyone was like, that's a really good point. We have to have faith, not just attempt. We need to have it. And so I raised my hand and I was like, I don't think I have faith most days. And it crushes me. And it debilitates me and it leaves me depressed and I don't know what's happening. And I want to have faith and I want God to help me have faith. And I believe, as much as I believe in God, I believe that he must be trying and I don't know what's preventing me. But I swear I'm trying. I'm trying so hard that it is so difficult to talk about. And so it's hard to then hear that despite my efforts of trying as hard as possible to like reach out to this God that I oftentimes don't feel like is reaching back, but I'm told is, but I don't know why I can't hear him. It's really hard to hear that that's not enough for him. And I don't know what to do about it. So what does someone like me do about that, where I'm trying as hard as possible and yet that's not enough for God? And the guy who said it immediately was like, yeah, I don't know why I said that. I think I heard one person say that one time, but obviously it's not true. I think that's like enough. And everyone in the crowd, like you could hear it shift where people are like, yeah, I don't know. I think that probably is enough. And like another guy raised his hand. He's like, I don't think I believe in God all that much either. And I'm trying my best. And it became a really good discussion and it was well received. But still checked the box because I was like, none of you have a good answer for why I can't believe in God despite my best efforts. But I do think it was like, it was well received in some ways and then poorly received after I left the church. I think after I left the church, then it was like, well, you were always talking about how you didn't believe in God and stuff like that. Of course you left. You were fixated on the wrong things. And I was like, I was trying to convey the opposite. So anyway, I think mixed bag depending on it. But I do think being like outright and like that honest made me a better comedian in the end, where it showed me like even in church among people who I was like, I can't tell these people I don't believe in God. The fact that it was still like listened to because I was being honest, I mean, that just better informed my comedy where I was like, oh yeah, you can actually say a lot of outrageous things to people so long as you're being like thoughtful and honest about it. And they'll listen to you a little bit, which, yeah, I feel like is what you were saying at the very beginning, where it's like I brought a little bit of humor and all of a sudden these apologists are like, oh, I'll hear you out a little bit. You know?
Yeah, I just think it comes from people kind of craving authenticity, even if they are not in a space where they can do it themselves.
Yeah.
They can see that other people are able. The way you're describing that reminds me of the difference between like how we talk in the temple and how we're like so positive. I love this so much. And then when you really get down to brass tacks, it's a little bit different when you can be honest, even
like, I fall asleep every time. This is boring.
Yeah.
And the endowment session is so boring.
Yeah.
And
not allowed to say that though.
Yeah, they're like, isn't that the most meaningful spiritual experience you've ever had? And like, I guess I had visions if dreams count. I don't know. I slept the whole time.
Have you ever done a comedy church theme around the temple?
No, we've had like, I think the closest we got, we gave, not too long ago, we gave Greg a new name because he's never been Mormon. And that was very fun. We gave him a bunch of options. So we gave him, because of course the rules for having a new name, right, is that it has to be like biblical, Book of Mormon, or his church history. So we gave him options like, well, he's Greg, my co-host. He's an accountant, so one of his options was numbers, for instance. We also went
flipping through pages of them.
Yeah, we also went recent with it, and so we gave him the option of recent Mormon history. His name could be Tim Ballard if he wanted it to be. Stuff like
my personal favorite.
So it was super fun. We've never had like directly temple. I think mostly because the hope and goal of the show is for it to be religiously broad enough so that like people from any sort of walk of life.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, Greg, of course, being like ex-evangelical helps, because if we had a temple theme, I think he would just be like, temples sure are big, huh? Like he doesn't have anything to say about it. You know? But that being said, I would do something about like worship bands, because I've got a lot to say about other people's
worship band music.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Have you been to other churches?
Yeah. Like my story in 2 sentences is that I was like a Jesus freak for 7 years, basically. My older sister was really Mormon. And when she left in like 2012, it rocked my world. So I wanted to get back to basics and just like understand my relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay. And what happened through that was just falling in love with some really dope pastors and sermons.
Oh, okay.
This guy, Kyle Edelman out of Kentucky. And I listened to his sermons every day, all day for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Pretty much until I left the church. And I actually got to go visit his church like the week after I became an atheist. And I met him, and still some like dope people with like some cheesy music, but like I still listen to worship music that I liked then and now. Like, Jesus, you are the one and you'll never forsake me. And like, I was lost in the wilderness. I do that with like my own intelligence now, where it's like, oh, I remember this. I'm coming into remembrance of my brain. And it's not about worshiping Jesus as much.
Oh, that's cool.
Where I'm like, you were always there for me, brain. And I've just ignored you. And I'm coming home to myself and not to Jesus.
Oh, that's very sweet. I like that.
Yeah. I still have a special place in my heart for like things around Christianity, Christ consciousness, and just all of like just that uplifting stuff that I think we all kind of want to strive for in different religions. We just call it different things.
Yeah. I think a lot of that stuff like provides a level of awareness to think about others. Unfortunately, I think too often for too many people, it then like points the finger back to God, which like dehumanizes people in some ways as well. Like it was such a big deal for me switching from the idea of like all good from God, all evil from man sort of thing. and then realizing like, oh, actually all good and all bad from mankind, it turns out. That was like super helpful, because before, when I was like, oh, humans are always getting in the way, instead I felt like it transitioned to me thinking like, oh, mankind needs to be like protected and cared for because we're all still like children doing our best. It just turns out sometimes there's destructive kids out there and we got to correct that. And then other times it's just people messing up because we're all supremely good and supremely evil, if that exists, you know? So it's good to like realize that dichotomy of like, oh yeah, I can point back the finger to myself and others and be like, we're actually really good.
Yeah.
And when people are like, but what about this terrible thing someone did? I'm like, well, that part was really bad, but they're still really good too.
Yeah. This is where we're getting into the advice section for people who are listening to this and my podcast, because they like deconstruction stuff with a sense of humor. But yeah, I would totally agree, because one of the best lessons to learn, whether you are religious or not, is just like all of the evil, all of the things that you dislike in somebody else, or all of the good things sometimes too. Yeah, they all like exist within me too. Everything that I dislike about like my super zealous parents and stuff. Yeah. That would be me if I was born to their parents at that time with that experience. I just happen to have different tools. And so out of no really like free will of my own, if I really like developed them necessarily, it's just coming into an awareness and be conscientious of it. But I'm like, all of that stuff that exists in other people exists in me. And it's not like a black and white, demonic, angelic. Yeah. It just humanizes people.
And then I think it changes like my actions and my thought process from things like, being Mormon especially, and how I would look at like politics, for instance, and the idea of like, oh, well, the United States government can actually never fail until the last days right before Jesus returns anyway. And it like builds up this barrier where like I've talked to my still currently religious family members, and sometimes where I'm like, well, you know that like these political actions could result in civil unrest and blah, 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 and all this stuff because government's not caring for the poor among us, which is like a lesson from Jesus. And then I feel like oftentimes they can just ignore it because they're like, no, that'll never happen because the government cannot fail. And if it does fail, that's just by God anyway. So it's actually ushering in Jesus. So if what I voted for does bring the downfall of the government, well, that was just Jesus' plan. So it's actually really good. And if it doesn't, well, it couldn't anyway because the government will never fall. And instead, as soon as you let go of that and you're just like, no, what if it's just up to us to like make it as good or as bad as we want it to be? Then I feel like if that was the case, those same people would probably think one step more and be like, oh, what are the actual consequences of this if you don't have a intervening God who's guaranteeing this prophecy that I'm really banking on, sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I heard an evangelical talk once I deconstructed on my channel where they're talking about how if you want to build a kingdom of God on earth, like you're talking socialism, kingdom of God is only supposed to exist in heaven. Yeah. Anything else is like going to be some kind of satanic counterfeit. And like, don't even try to create the kingdom of God on earth. Like, don't even attempt it.
Yeah. We should never pave any streets with our taxes because heaven paves in gold. So why would we try? You're going to pave streets like God? You think you're God? Like, it's such a weird,
like literally tiptoe around this terrestrial kingdom for now because you don't want to go messing shit up before Jesus comes.
Yeah. I want to go back just a little bit, if that's okay, to your question of like church and comedy and all that and like how it influenced and stuff. Something that I thought was really interesting is in comedy church, I will sometimes tell the same jokes that I told when I was an active Mormon. And it's been like an interesting lesson that I think every comedian knows exists, right? Which is like your perspective or your jokes and how good they are oftentimes determined by like your current perspective and like who people read you as. So I would have Bible jokes or Book of Mormon jokes or jokes about like what I've done in the past as a religious person. But because everybody knew like, but he's still on our side, like he's still an active Mormon. It's so interesting to me that I would tell those jokes and they'd be like, this guy's funny. That's the edgy Mormon material I'm looking for sort of thing. And then when I left the church and I'm like, so here's my joke that I told before. And as soon as I'm no longer on the team, people are like, that's actually blasphemy. I'm like, it wasn't blasphemy 2 weeks ago. And they're yeah, but you were on our team. And I don't think and it's interesting because I don't think there's anything wrong with that from those people. I think it's stupid as a comedian to be like, no, all jokes are for all people in all situations. And if you don't laugh at my jokes, there's something wrong with you. I think that's dumb. I think it's totally fine for a joke to be really good to one person and not good to another person. Like, that's comedy. It is what it is, sort of thing. But it doesn't mean it's not like fascinating. That's someone who I got a comment, for instance, one time where people are like, someone was like, I was your biggest fan back in the day. I thought you were literally a genius. And I was like, literally a genius? You should watch more comedy. But they were like, I thought you were literally a genius. And now watching your stuff and what you've become, so disappointing. And it was a comment on a video that I was like, I've been doing this joke for, honestly, too long. Like, I should retire this joke. This is the same joke I told before, sort of thing. But it was just that perspective switch, you know?
I'm curious to know, why do you think people need to reach out and say things like that to you?
God, if I knew, I am, it's so funny. I am not that person, which I think surprises people sometimes, because they're like, well, you're a comedian. You must really think you have things to say. And I'm always like, it's kind of the opposite. I think I have the least important things, and I always talk about them. And I'm always amazed at anyone who wants to listen. So we've talked about this, where I'm like, I have such a hard time doing like forward-facing videos, going live, any of that stuff, because my brain just immediately is like, no one cares what you have to say, man. No one wants to listen to you, even though my literal career is talking and convincing people to like listen to me. But for whatever reason, I'm always like, no one wants to hear, no one wants your comment on their video. No one cares what you have to say, blah, blah, blah. So it is the most bewildering thing to me to have people reach out in any comment, especially negatively, where I'm like, all that's going to do is turn your algorithm into watching more of my stuff that you said that you hate. And I don't care what you have to say because you don't like it. So like, what's going on? What are you getting out of this comment?
Because I think when I talk about my new friend, Adam Broud's coming on my podcast, I'm going to comedy church, and I'm like, to me, he's the funniest comedian in the state of Utah. Oh. That's how I would describe you.
I'm going to take that as a real thing that you said and not just like an example. I don't know if it was real, but I'm taking it. Don't even
everybody. Say it. But no, truthfully, that's what I've been saying. I was like, to me, absolutely, you are a genius. I do think you are that funny. And I feel like there's this celebrity thing within Mormons, whether it's like people on Dancing with the Stars or actors or singers, that like when somebody's Mormon and they can like make it in the biz and still stick to their morals. And it's like, we did it, you know, like we don't have to be those weirdos who are on the sidelines. We get to participate in culture and comedy and stuff. And then when you leave, it's like people who really respect the arts and comedy and that kind of stuff. Speaking from experience, like it kind of would sink my heart thinking like, oh, but they left. Like it's, you know, you're just like watching these like pigeons be, you know, shot off one by one. Like they can't make it like I thought that they could. And people, I don't know, that's just my interpretation, that they feel like the church is less true because every artist that can't stick with their testimony makes it less true for them. Except
for Brandon Flowers, still going strong.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's the one. He's the savior at heart for Mormons. No, I think that's a really good point, and I think it is. I can feel that as well. I felt like I felt that, but the funny thing being on this side of things now is I think if I talked to those people, I would want to communicate to them directly. Like if it was person to person, I would want to explain to them like, I am so much more on your side than you even realize, because anytime that I do comedy outside of Utah and I talk about Mormon stuff, people are always really interested in it, and they always they want to hear about it, they want to laugh about the things that I talk about, but the things I joke about as well I think are mostly stuff a lot of Mormons would also probably agree, like, oh yeah, that's the weird, quirky, potentially gross part as well. But if any of those strangers outside of Mormonism who've never participated, if I were to tell a joke about Mormonism and they were to be like, yeah, because fuck Mormonism, I would probably be like, no, fuck you. You don't know what you're talking about, sort of thing. I'd still be like, I mean, yeah, like the religion as a whole, I'm not on board with, don't really love it, don't join it. But also, you don't know what you're talking about, man. Like, back off just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so it's also funny to me where I'm like, I bet any of those commenters, I'd be like, I bet we have so much more common ground in agreement than you realize. But obviously getting it from the mouthpiece of someone who it's like, so this thing kind of sucked, right? You know, it's hard to accept it and hear it. I get it.
Yeah. Like, especially doing this as my job, and there's comment sections. There's an aspect of Mormonism where like, you know, there's 8 billion people on earth. If I was a content creator, I want to be able to reach as many people with my content as possible.
People are children of God.
Yeah. And
call them what they are.
Precisely. And children of God who need to help me by joining my Patreon, for instance. Like, children of God really mean the most to me when they're
subscribers.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are the most children of God.
Yeah. So they become teenagers of God in my eyes in that moment.
I was going to go the opposite way. I was going to go like infants, because they're even more precious and perfect. In my eyes, they do no wrong. So yeah, the aspect of trying to make content in a way where, like, in one way, my content brain can go like, okay, like, Mormonism is a canvas of a lot of stuff that's crazy. I can explain like come look at the freak show of all the stuff we believe. But that's, as much as people listening to this might push back on that, truly, that's never really been what I want to do. I'll kind of like dabble in that and try to like have a spin on it. But truthfully, I'm looking for people who are kind of where I was, where they appreciate comedy, they appreciate like a different intellectual kind of spin on something that hasn't been said before, that isn't about like some kind of like gawking at a freak show that's just general to the public, that it's more of a specific audience. Because like that, you can do that, but it doesn't feel authentic, because I know I wouldn't listen to that. Yeah,
it feels tired. It feels like all those things that I just shrugged off as an active Mormon anyway, right? Where it's like, if you come at me with the exact same arguments that I've heard 1,000 times before, just because I'm on the outside of this religion doesn't mean that I don't remember what it was like to be like, yeah, but that's kind of bullshit, right? Like, I don't buy into that. Something you just said that I think is interesting as well is it is funny how many people, who I think look at these art forms and they're like, oh, you must have a bone to pick. And it's like, not really. Kind of just making comedy. Like we've got for Comedy Church, we wrote a song that's like a fake worship song, and it was for our swearing show. That was the theme, is swears. It was a very fun show. And the whole concept of the song was Greg had made a joke where he was like, I should have asked, I can swear on this.
We already have talked about how Uthor finds the G-spot. I think we're bad. Yeah,
perfect. So Greg made the point where he's like, an all-knowing God should be able to tell the difference between fuck you and I fucking love you, right? Like, it's stupid, I think, to believe in a God who's like, no swears anytime. And it's like, that's such a strange rule to hold for a supreme all-knowing being, right? So we wrote a fake worship song, and the chorus is, I'm a bitch for Jesus, I'm a cunt for Christ. And it's like potentially off-putting for some groups of people. But we did it because we were driving up to Idaho for a gig, and we were talking about our swearing show, and I just came up with that as a hook, and we couldn't stop laughing. We were like, this is so funny. And so it's been very funny to me. After we posted it, it's gone pretty viral. There's been some people who have made comments where they basically ask, like, why would you do this? Like, why would you make this? And I'm like, I would love for there to be this deep philosophical thing, and there kind of is a little bit, where it's like pushback about like what type of God you're choosing to believe, and what beliefs you really want to hold to, and what beliefs you want to put on other people so that you can feel righteous judgment, blah, blah, blah. There is that philosophical element, I guess, to the joke. But ultimately, why did we do this? Is because we were driving, and I said, I'm a bitch for Jesus, I'm a cunt for Christ. And we both start laughing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole reason why we made it. Yeah. Is that primarily we were like, why do we do this? Because it's pretty fucking funny to us. Yeah. And it can be not funny to anyone else. Doesn't matter. It's still funny to me. So I wrote the song. Like, I know that you want something more. I know you want me to give you this comment that makes it so you can take it back to your church and talk about how the world is against you. It's not. It's literally just, I made a joke, and I was like, pretty funny, huh? That's it. It's the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's hilarious.
It's literally just like comedy first. But yeah, it is still surprising to me how many people leave comments, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's just not for you. Which is a very common thing that I reply to people, where they're like, this isn't funny at all. And I used to try to convince people, mostly because
I used to try to convince people that I am a Christ cunt, but now I don't try to do that anymore.
Well, I always tried to like convince them in the comments, because I'm a big believer in trying to be the same person everywhere you go. And I hate being like a different, I feel like so many people are just different in the comment section, right? They feel like they can win an argument by being over the top or like overly dramatic or overly angry. So I try to just talk to people the same way I would in person. So I'll say things in comments where people are like, I hated this and I hate this guy. And I say things like, oh, ouch, that really hurts. You don't have to like the comedy, but you don't know me, right? And I think people read that and they're like, well, pussy, why would you say that? I'm like, I don't know, because those are my true authentic feelings. I'm not sure.
They call you a pussy.
Yeah, I feel like people do, where they're like, you're not supposed to respond that way.
It's like your first day on the internet.
Basically.
You're like, ouch.
Yeah, well,
I just got here, guys.
Kind of, where I am just like, I don't know, would you say that to me in person? You hate me as an individual? You don't know me as an individual.
Yeah.
But now I've just started, I don't try to convince them. I just leave comments where usually if they're like, this wasn't funny, I hated this, I usually say, it's actually really funny. It's just not for you. You should just go find comedy that you really like. And you should probably block us because otherwise it's going to keep popping up in your algorithm. I'm like, you should move on. I don't need you to like this, but it's still really funny. I would be lying if I said it wasn't.
Yeah. Like the most helpful types of comments would have to be like something constructive of like, oh, sometimes people will yes and me.
Yeah.
And I love my following and my comment section and stuff. People are always saying like really hilarious things, that's like the best kind. Is that people can
build
yes
on
and
my
you.
jokes. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Don't tell me how to do my comedy though in the comment section. Have you had a lot of those people where it is like funnier if you say this way?
People tell me to stop talking so fast. And that's what I told you when we were having lunch with Maria Banford. She has a joke about how people tell her to, have you thought about getting on different psychiatric medications that'll interact with your other psychiatric medications so that you can have better mental health? And she's like, no, weakness is the brand. That's her joke. So I riff on that. And I'm just like, I talk fast because I talk about Mormonism, and confusion is the brand.
Nice.
I just have to there's too much to talk about. And I have to talk fast. And if you're confused, that's part of the thing that we're doing. Yeah.
I love when people build a joke where they've got one as well. I've commented on a few comments where people leave them or DM them where I'm like, can I add this to the bit? And I think people are always complimented by that. We're like, of course.
That's great.
Like I've never had anyone say no. And I love that. But
I'm just going to start doing premises for TikToks and stuff and just be like, anyone else have a punchline? Let me know.
There's a guy who does that, and that drives me up a wall. It was so surprising. I can't remember his name, but he was just cranking out skits. And I was like, how does he have so many? And then I watched one of his lives. In his live, he literally just called it like the writing group or something. And it was just him asking his fans, like, what should I be joking about? And people would be like, what about the Romans inventing the aqueducts for whatever reason? Because he always did like historical stuff. And he would even be like, wait, what's like the joke with that? Like, what's the thing? Oh, because of this? Okay, if I did that, where do I take it? Okay, I'll write that down. Okay, thanks, guys. And I'm like, you can do that? You can just have the internet write all your material? That's wild.
Wow, yeah.
But the critiques of like, you should do it this way. Oh man, have you ever looked through Dry Bar comments?
No, thankfully.
It's Midwestern kindness, and it is, kills me every single time.
It's like people who found TikTok but should stay on Facebook, or what?
Well, it's comments through Facebook a lot of times, but it's people.
How did I know that? I just guessed.
It's true. Yeah. It's that Midwestern kindness where it's the meanest thing you've ever heard given in the tone of advice. Like the amount of times I've seen Dry Bar comments that say something to the effect of like, they seem like a really nice person, but I think we can all agree that stand-up comedy just isn't for you. It's really good you gave it a shot, and that you've made it this far is so impressive to you as a person. But I think it's pretty obvious you need to pursue something else. But thanks so much. No, not to me. I don't have a Dry Bar special.
Oh yeah.
I've only hosted, but to friends like Dry Bar specials where it's just this thing of like, really great job, clearly not good enough. I think you should pursue something else. And I'm like, oh, that would hurt me so much more than someone being like, this cuck is telling terrible jokes.
Yeah.
Like that guy, I'm like, screw you. You don't know. But someone who's like, can I give you some job advice for a second? I'm like, oh no, you're trying to actively help me. This hurts so much worse.
Yeah. Only thing I have going for me is just right self-awareness about how far I have to go.
Oh, sure.
And how I know what a shit show I am in every way.
Yeah.
And you don't need to leave the comments because I already know exactly what I have.
That is kind of the thing, though, where it's like, you think I don't think about this to the point that I know I half-assed this joke.
Mm-hmm.
You think I don't know that this joke isn't there yet?
Yeah.
I'm trying so hard.
Did I tell you what I did the other day with ChatGPT? Oh, I've been telling everyone this. What you got to do is online journal.
Okay.
And so I have an online journal I've had for months and months and months.
Public?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just, all my deepest inner thoughts.
Perfect.
And sometimes I'll go on ChatGPT because you kind of have to like have it get to know you. You ask it questions generally about, what you're working on and stuff. And then sometimes what you can do, it's like literally will save you thousands of dollars. Free therapy is just like paste your journal entries and then ask it to find like any like coping mechanisms, or I can't try to think of the other words, or like victim complexes or blind spots that I have in this, and like analyze it like a therapist and give me like data points, or unpack this through different layers of my psyche, then unpack it again, and then unpack it till there's no more layers left. So like you can really get some fun free therapy.
And ChatGPT came back and was like, actually, you're perfect, Carah. And like, I trained it right. I did it. I trained it.
Oh man, it'd be like broke the system. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I wish.
But it came back with good stuff. Like you genuinely felt like this was helpful.
So this is, I'm building. The best thing that you can do, but this is free advice for everybody, is ask it to like, I asked it, create 20 sentences of things that you think that I think about myself in terms of like a victim complex, and unpack it, and then unpack it again of where you think these come from.
You're a brave human.
And it literally, it was like opening up the mind of God.
Really?
If you could ask the most all-powerful, almighty thing to look inside your life and your psyche and give you, and it was about 15 out of 20 of them, I was like, I am strong enough to hear this. Wow.
Can I ask you this?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it was truly insightful, or was it like the Barnum effect type stuff? Because I've heard of people experiencing that, where it's like specific enough that it feels real, but broad enough that it's like a bit of a...
Oh yeah, it was totally specific enough.
You felt like it was specific. You're like, no, this is legit.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
There's even one where like, it's funny because you can play a victim even when you're trying to be strong. So like going through this divorce and everything, there was a sentence where it was like basically describing how just saying that I've learned a lot along the way still puts me into a type of victim complex where it's me reflecting on that I have gone through more than like my ex-husband has, and that I am elevating my pain over somebody else's, which is like, God, whose other pain am I going to elevate over?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But also, God, you are very strong to be able to hear that and walk away and be like, good point. Yeah. Because to me, I would be like, oh, no. You're a good person.
It was fun. So what I'm building to, the funnest thing though, was asking it to roast me. And so I said, now I want you to roast me like a stand-up comedian. Do not try to be moral. Just be as funny and mean as you possibly can, given everything you know about me. And I want you to do a complete comedy set and just roast me so I could see what if somebody were to roast me, what it would sound like. And it was so fucking funny.
Really?
It made me laugh out loud. I called up my sister.
That's wild.
And laughed. There's like a time in which I was trying to
That's like scary to me in a way. Because I've never seen ChatGPT be good at humor.
No, it's not good at humor, but if it's stuff that you have put in there that it knows about you and it can shove it back in your face. Oh, okay. Is what's really, really funny.
Oh, so it's maybe like saying this bold fact out loud.
Yeah.
Is funny because that's audacious sort of joke.
Yeah. So for example, I was asking it something. So it's taking every question I've ever asked. It's using. And there was a time in which I was asking it to help me create a chore wheel, for my family. So the house is like less chaotic, and we have like the kids and me and Aaron and stuff, this chore wheel. And just one of the jokes that made me laugh out loud was like, the only reason your kids spin the chore wheel is to find out which parent is going to disappoint them next. And I was
that is pretty good. Oh, geez. That is pretty good.
So anyway, we're on the topic of having other people help us write jokes. The only thing is just journaling and writing. And then the more that like I am just going inward and reflecting, and then obviously using technology sometimes like that's kind of like the only help in this space. But it's really hard to have anybody else kind of like help you know who you are, because to me, like, comedy is so personal. You ever hear a joke and you're like, my life's over because I didn't write that joke. I am so sad that joke has been written and I didn't write it. I'll never write anything that funny. And so I did comedy between the time when I was like 19, 20, 21, moved to LA, but I never felt like it was personal. It was just like funny little one-liners I thought of.
Sure.
And so now on this side, like, it's only going to be reflective of my life, my experiences, and it's going to be extremely personal.
Yeah.
And the only way to get there is just spending a lot of time journaling, thinking out loud, talking. And people have seen me live stream a lot on TikTok, but that's kind of just to get used to like talking in front of people more.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts though.
You know, this last, what show was, it was our church camp. We have a church camp show for Comedy Church. And that was the first time. So I journaled a lot as a kid. I have a stack of journals that's like this big. It's massive, but it's all like pen to page. I basically stopped like right after my mission. So I don't have anything current. But anyway, for the church camp show, I read my like journal entries from when I was at EFY and like youth conference and stuff like that. And I love the whole mentality of like comedy shouldn't feel safe. You should do things that like make you feel uncomfortable as a performer and stuff like that. And I think I've done this like long enough, and I host a lot, and it's harder to do things that feel dangerous when you're a host just because you become too niche, and you don't want like a real niche joke as a host because you're supposed to open a show and like get everybody laughing for like a more general approach. Anyway, that's the excuse I give myself. If I put that into ChatGPT, maybe it would tell me why there's so many things wrong with it. But
afraid to fail, you're afraid to be rejected. Everything comes down to like you're afraid of being abandoned and rejected. It's like, who isn't? Come on.
I just imagine I'm like, okay, I guess I'll start opening shows with my PowerPoint about how good bread is. I guess I'll start doing that. I feel like everyone's going to hate
everyone
that.
Loves.
Yeah, people like it as a bit, but I can't imagine being the second comedian going up after a host who just talked about bread in a PowerPoint. I'd be like, love that. Also, this isn't like just your show, right? Like we're all kind of in this together. Anyway, point being, the last thing that I did though that felt dangerous to me was reading my journals on stage and like actively reading like, oh God, this isn't just me being like, can you believe that I thought this? And then like editing things out, like actually reading verbatim what I was like as a teenager was like painful and scary and embarrassing in so many ways, but very good.
And I have your journals right here. Bring them on out. No, it's not that kind of show.
But that would be fun to like, because the downside was I had to read a bunch of my journals because I wanted to find the fun and funny things to talk about. And Greg has said the same exact thing where when he reads his old journals when he was religious, there are so many things now that in retrospect, I'm like, oh, this is so much sadder than I realized. So that would be fun to like upload all those physical journals and then process it through. So I don't have to read all the sad shit. And I can just get straight to
your iPhone, take a picture, scan page through the notes, scan.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Man, I should get better at technology. I'd be such a better comedian for it.
No, probably worse. Probably you've already peaked. You're fine.
Yeah. Someone just roasts me by being like, this sounds like ChatGPT. Oh, no. Oh, no. Full circle.
That'd be funny. Just the same way like a professor is like, you've plagiarized this.
Yeah. Someone's got their recording device up. They're just like, it's got an 89% is written by AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I need to know what kind of stuff were in your journals. What kind of Mormon were you? Take me through. I want to hear, where did you grow up? What kind of family are you from? Like, all the stuff that kind of influenced your religious upbringing and how you perceive the world.
Yeah. So I grew up in kind of two places. I grew up in rural Ohio and then rural Oregon.
Oh, where were you in rural Ohio?
A place called Sydney, Ohio. It's like 45 minutes north of Dayton. Middle of nowhere as far as Ohio goes, because Ohio is the type of place where my wife and I were talking about moving back, and I was talking to someone from Ohio. I was like, yeah, we might move back because you can still buy a house like in Cincinnati, like $300,000. And they were like, you think you could buy a house in Cincinnati for $300,000? No, you can't. That's crazy. And I was like, I can pull it up right here. And they're like, no, you would have to live like all the way 20 minutes outside of the city for that to happen. And I was like, oh, that's right. I live in Utah. In Utah, 20 minutes outside the city, still part of the city, still counts, sort of thing. So anyway, 45 minutes north of Dayton.
I just looked it up, by the way.
Sydney?
Yeah.
Tiny little town.
You know, I'm from Lake Erie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I grew up right next to Cedar Point.
Nice. Yeah, we went most summers to Cedar Point. My dad was born in Sandusky.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That wine bottle I was telling you about from my family's winery, that's from an island in the middle of Lake Erie called Put in Bay, Heinemann Winery. Yeah.
Nice.
That's where my family's from.
When did you move from Ohio?
We moved when I was 5, but we went back every summer. Like all my dad's family.
Oh, so you like spent a lot of time
there.
Back in Ohio.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So I love Ohio.
I can't say I will extend that grace to it. I do like Cincinnati, and that's the one place. Everything else.
Cincinnati's dope.
Cincinnati's surprisingly.
I just went 2 months ago. So fun.
Really?
Yeah, my cousin lives there.
It's wild to me how like pretty it is, and it's got the river right there, and it's got the art walk. Like it is. It's like a cleaner Portland. And that's from someone who considers themselves an Oregonian. But yeah, it's pretty nice. But yeah, so I lived out in the middle of nowhere there. Grew up pretty poor. We like lived in a trailer, like a single wide trailer. So 7 of us living in like 500 square feet. I think it's technically like 416 square feet or something like that. Tiny little tin can, stuff like that. Next to no Mormons there. And so and my parents, they shouldn't have been together. They always fought and stuff like that. So they were always like screaming at each other in 400 square feet, so I heard every single word. So the church very much so to me was like a promise where it was like, if you do these things, you can have a happy family. And so the positive and the negative, I think, from that is it gave me the sense of control, which I think is good in a way that it influenced me that when problems arise in my life, I do feel like a good part of who I am, which this is like going against all my comedic sensibilities, is I'm like, no, you must talk about the bad parts of you. But I think a good part of me is when problems arise, I do naturally think about like, well, what is in my sphere of influence? How can I act to make this better for me? What can I do? What's in my control and my power? And I think that stems from coming from a church that told me things are in your control and your power and you can do this stuff. Downside of that is it wasn't true that like the more you read your scriptures, the less your parents will fight, sort of thing. That didn't really happen. But it gave me the sense of control and at least some sort of semblance of like things can be better. It's okay. You'll be okay, sort of deal.
Kind of like just quelling your anxieties.
Yeah. Giving more anxieties in other ways though, right? Because it's like, oh shit, I didn't read my scriptures. I'm not contributing to my family to make this like a harmonious environment. Now my parents are fighting. Is that like partially on me? Blah, 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 blah.
And were your parents like married in the temple too?
They got sealed in the temple when I was like, so my dad converted when I was 5. My mom converted when she was a teenager. And then she like didn't really do anything with the church until she was like, I don't know, in her 20s. My parents were really young as well. Like my mom had my oldest brother when she was 16. And then, so I must have been like, so I was 20. So she was 21 when I was born. So anyway, so they were very, very, very young, right? So we got sealed in the DC temple when I was like 5 or 6, I think. 5 years old, probably. Something like that. So yeah, anyway, so I grew up there, no Mormons around at all, felt this need to be like, oh, I must be essentially perfect to make sure that like things go well in my family. So I was the type of Mormon that was like super annoying, rule follower. I used to take Book of Mormons from the library because I didn't know that you weren't allowed to do that at church, that you had to like return them. I'd take them and like give them to people in elementary school and talk to them about the importance of reading the Book of Mormon and stuff like that. My family went pretty hardcore into stuff as well in a lot of ways. Like growing up, I don't feel like Mormons do this anymore, but there was always that debate, right? Where it's like, can we drink caffeine? Can't we drink caffeine? Blah, blah, blah. Now it feels like just everybody drinks caffeine. I haven't met a Mormon who doesn't in forever, but we went so far as we didn't even eat chocolate. And I kind of loved that. because it meant that every day at school when we get like a little treat or prize, I would be like, oh, is this chocolate? People would be like, oh yeah, it is. Are you allergic? I'd be like, no, I'm not allergic. I'm a believer of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ.
You would not say that.
Absolutely.
No way.
It was just like, thank goodness for Hershey's, while a sin does provide me with the context to bear my testimony each and every day.
That was me being a vegetarian as a kid, too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Be like, well, this animal died and I'm going to be putting it in the trash now. It does give me a time to be in the spotlight and let everyone know how I'm better than them.
So we were both the worst invites to anybody's birthday party. You would have been there being like, hot dogs, interesting. And I would have been like, Mr. Goodbar, not so good, in my opinion. Like sort of thing. So yeah, it was just, I was very much so like testimony all the time, super Mormon, all this stuff, reading books that weren't just the scriptures that were like written by apostles at like 10 years old to try to wrap my head around eternity, blah, blah, blah. And then I moved to Oregon, and there were more Mormons there. It was like, I think my school was like 5% Mormon or something like that. There was a church across the street from the high school. We had release time seminary, all that sort of stuff. So it was confusing for a while, where all of a sudden I was like, there's so many Mormons and we all agree that these are all the rules that we all abide by. And then I saw my friends doing outrageously sinful things, like drinking Dr. Pepper. And I was like, how could you? Do you realize what a fool I look like when I'm bearing my testimony about chocolate and you come in with a Dr. Pepper? It's outrageous. Don't you see who's crazy between us? Clearly.
I can see why your talks were about like the doing and then the saying and the not doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because it just occupied my thoughts constantly. So I was very much so like rules follower. To prep for my mission, like the year before, I read 100 books that were gospel related. From
100?
100 books. That was my goal, and I hit it. And it was from different denominations, because I also visited something like 50 different churches or something outrageous, because my thoughts and feelings were, if I'm going to go out and convert people to the gospel, they're clearly going to talk to me about their church. And if I'm going to invite people to my church, it does feel supremely unfair for them to be like, you should come to my church. I'm like, absolutely not. You have to come to mine. So I like went to Baptist church and Catholic churches and all those different churches and read like writings from St. Francis de Assisi and stuff like that, to try to like better understand all these world religions so that I could better talk to them. And then I went out into Brazil and found out that no one knows a thing about the religion. It turns out it's something that barely anybody ever thinks about, is truly the concept of God. And most people who believe in God are just like, there's a guy out there who really likes me. Pretty cool. Like, oh no.
And back to smoking.
Yeah, exactly. Where they're just like, you think God cares if I smoke? He's all loving. And I was like, he loves you? He hates me. Like, sort of thing. So yeah, very rules follower.
Very different types of religion. Yours sounds lame.
Yeah. Well, and that was like, I mean, that was a huge like changing point for me. It was on my mission that I saw all these people who were like, God is love, all this stuff. And even though I didn't feel convinced that all of them felt it, I was interested, where I was like, I don't know that I've really felt the love of God in my life. God feels like rules. I read so much because I thought knowledge equated to faith, and doesn't. And
it sure doesn't.
It
Man.
sure doesn't.
Oof.
Yeah.
Mutually exclusive.
Big mistake on my part. But it compensated for my faith, where it was just like, how can I not believe this if I read 100 books about God? How can I not believe him? What am I doing? Right? So coming back from my mission.
Hold on, pause there. Did you just say that reading a lot and trying to know a lot about religion compensated for your lack of faith in God?
Yeah, it made me,
that you could intellectualize your way because you put in the work.
Yeah. Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. If I read 100 books on this, then how can it not be true? Right. Which is obviously false and very silly, because, you know, anyone can say that. They can say, if I spent 3,000 hours on World of Warcraft, how can you tell me it's unimportant? It doesn't make any sense. Do you hear how stupid you sound right now? Like, anyone can say that about anything, right?
You're killing me.
But it was very much so. It was like a dawning. It was a realization where I was like, oh, just because I've read all the ensigns going back to 1970 or whatever it was, which isn't true, but just an example. That doesn't mean that I have faith or that I'm believing the right thing. That just means I read a bunch of shit. Like, that's it. I don't know God, apparently, because he's this all-loving father. And what he feels like is he feels like a list of rules. And that's not good, and I don't feel like it's good for my mental health. And going on my mission, I lost all my personality. Did you serve a mission?
No. I served a mission for the cause of love.
Oh, that's right.
And marriage.
You got married.
I got married at 19.
You upheld the higher law. Good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Good for you.
Yeah, the higher law where I got to get busy. That's all.
Yeah, which I was not that type of missionary. But I lost all my personality on my mission. I told one joke on my mission.
Are you kidding?
One joke. And I came back sadder for it, where I was like, I don't think I like that guy. And if God created me, he can't want me to be that person. Like, I was as close to perfection as I'd been taught. And it was my least favorite version of me. I was like, this guy sucks. And I felt like everyone agreed. Like, on my mission, people would be like, you used to do stand-up comedy, but you suck. Like, I know I do. And I can't stop being this person. I hate it. And so I came back and I was like, cool. I want to discover this God who like created me and loves me. And I want to feel that. Like, I want to feel that thing everyone talks about all the time. And the more that I like pursued that relationship of like praying with like a conversation in mind rather than praying to like check boxes or like say the right things, instead just like trying to converse with my Father in heaven, the less of a response I felt like I was getting. The more I like read the scriptures to be like, I want to read these and like find how God loves all of us, the more I was like, God, if I wrote this about my kids, I would expect CPS to show up at my house. Like, this
totally.
Most of this is not good. Like, this is scary. Like, these are scary things to read that God thinks us. So just trying to put him under this lens of like a father who loves me, it was just so incongruent with everything that I was trying to do that I was finally like, I'm going insane. Like, I'm literally going insane trying to find this God of love. So eventually I was just like, I'm going to try an experiment, and I'm going to act like I am not Mormon. And it was literally a day that I was like, oh, this is so much better for me. Like, all those feelings of like love and compassion, and that like I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt that the day that someone was like, are you Mormon? I was like, nah. And I was like, oh, that feels so warm. So good. Like, all of those spiritual feelings just instantaneously. And I was like, fascinating. No wonder all you Mormons stick around. If this is what you feel this every time? Amazing.
Wow.
So yeah. So it was just like, yeah, finally that realization that I was like, oh, I'm actively trying to develop OCD. Maybe I should stop through religion, and maybe I can just be the person who I'm like, but I like this version of me, and I think that's like a good person. And the more I've pursued that instead, I'm like, oh yeah, life is beautiful, life is good, and I feel so good about it, sort of thing.
Yeah, interesting. Because for so many people who do that kind of path, they're like, you know, I call it like a DIY God, where they're like, okay, I'm going to cafeteria Mormon it, or I'm going to figure out exactly how I am my best self within the church while still maintaining within the church. But you just couldn't be able to put up with any of it. Yeah.
And you know what kind of helped with that was all the fucking Desnat people. Like, they kept reiterating to me how clearly wrong I was when I was like, God is love. And they would be like, if God is love, then why does he kill the Philistines? Clearly God is cruel, and you must believe in that God. And I'd be like, shit, you've got way more spiritual backing or biblical backing than I do for my claim. Like, my claim is God loves everyone. And you're like, no, he condemns the sinner and he hates them. And I'm like, shit, you're probably right.
I know. Like, to get like the God loves everyone, you have to like read between the lines, and they have like a book that big.
Or take the real scary approach where it's like, no, God kills people out of kindness. It's better that these people perish in these sins than they live on to commit further atrocities.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, then what's the difference between you killing people? And they're like, no one should kill people unless God asks you to. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to be a part of that sort of thing. Like, I have a distinct memory where we were asked in elders quorum one time. The teacher was like, I was talking to my wife about what they learn in Relief Society and what they talk about. And one of the main things she said they talk about is how can we better support our husbands in their priesthood callings and endeavors. And
I roll.
And he said, and this was good. He said, and in that moment, I realized how little in elders quorum we similarly talk about how can we support our wives in their endeavors. Ooh. So today's lesson is, how do we show our wives through our actions, both explicitly and implicitly, that we love them, care for them, about who they are, and better support them in what they want to do. blah, blah, blah. Which was a beautiful lesson, I thought it was really good. Shameful in a way that someone was like, I've got this novel idea, dudes. What if we liked women? Like, and everyone's like, you're a genius. Like, sort of thing. Like, that's crazy. But still nice that he like realized that, right? And so people had like a lot of input. Obviously, a lot of it is like what you would expect, where people are like, well, you can always put a baby in them so that they can better be a mother, sort of thing. And it's like, I think you're missing the point, dude. Stuff like that.
Can't even.
Yeah. So there were like bad responses, but there were good ones as well. And I made the comment where I was like, I don't think it's enough to just tell your wife that you support her. I think it is important to acknowledge that this world has been built for men. This is probably going to sound like I'm pandering a bit. I promise I'm not, but whatever. Even if people think I am.
He's married, ladies.
Yeah. Even if I am pandering, it's good to sometimes pander in a positive way. Anyway, but I was like, I think it's good to have implicit messages as well. Where I was like, there's a reason why most published books, authors are men. Most music you can find and listen to centuries back until today, made by men. If you looked at the world and you didn't realize how much sexism there's been, you would just assume like, man, men are really artsy fartsy, aren't they? It's just not the case. You need to take extra special care, I think, to fill your home with art made by women, books made by women, music made by women, so that every message of like equality isn't this explicit of like, and we are equal. Now look at my library filled with the words of men. There needs to be an implicit message as well, where it's like, we're all equal. Don't you see how all of our literature is a big mixed bag of genders and stuff like that? Anyway, I made that comment. A bunch of people also were like, that's a really good point. I think of all the books that I read in school, most of it by men. That's probably not fair, blah, 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 blah. It was feeling really good. Then one dude raised his hand and he was like, look, I know that sounds nice. I know that feels good in a way, but I think if we really look at the truth, which is the family proclamation to the world, women have their place, men have their place. It is unfair to expect them to operate in a place of men and to fulfill male roles and all that. It is important that we support them so long as we support them in a way that is conducive to how women are supposed to operate in the gospel. And in that moment,
oh, geez.
Internally, I was obviously like, this guy couldn't be more fucking wrong. Like, what a insane take. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's just so crazy. But the flip side of that was I was like, damn, if you just look at the teachings of the scriptures in the church, he's right, I'm wrong. And it was such like obvious message that I was like, but it's so clear that he's wrong and I'm right, as far as just like, he even said like, I know that sounds good and feels good. I know it's nice to include women, but we shouldn't, sort of thing. That it was such a like jarring experience where I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, this is so obvious that like I can pinpoint how wrong that was. And then on the flip side, it was so interesting that obviously what he was trying to do is he was like, let's all come back to Christ. This will better convince you of the truth of the gospel. But it did the opposite, where I was like, oh yeah, you provided the citations. And then I was like, that's bullshit, obviously. So it is funny to me that in some ways I'm like, the best testament of like all this stuff being wrong are those voices that are like, no, the prophet said. I'm like, God damn it. The prophet did say that.
Yeah.
You're right. He did say that. And I'm right that he was wrong, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, in a way, thank you, Mormon Nazis, for being the worst people in the world.
I know. Who among us has not lost their testimony through Desnats on Twitter and in Sunday school with one douchebag raising their hand and being like, ooh.
Yeah. Because what a wake-up call to like make a point that you feel is good, and then the worst person in the world is like, and to add to that, and you're like, oh no, what did I just say then?
Yeah, where like the thing that, especially once you have kids, I think it really changes like the way that we go on missions and everyone says like, 19-year-old, what can you possibly teach me about life? Yeah. And it's like, oh, but if I have the true gospel, I can teach you about life, even if you're 50 years old. The older I get now, like you're 36, I'm 35. The older I get, every year that I go by, I'm like, I cannot believe I ever told anyone that I know anything about life or about how to live their life.
Can't believe I still sometimes I'm like, I think I figured that out. I'm like, no, you didn't.
Yeah. It's just like the idea that I, at any point, really thought that I knew what I was talking about when it just takes like a little bit of life experience. Yeah. And if the pursuit that you're trying to go after is in opposition to the church teachings, but you know from at least your small amount of life experience that is like, you call it like the more progressive take, but like the more obvious equal one, because like I have kids now, I've lived a life now, and I know what I would want my kind of what society would want like my kids to be fostered within, like, and the idea that I lost my faith after I had 2 small kids, and it was like that time where you're like, oh, this is the church I have to raise them in. Yeah. Oh, and this is the church I have to raise in. It's not as simple as like I can teach them better ideas and values. Yeah. It's like these are the people who are going to be teaching them. This is the actual structure of the church. Yeah. No matter how much like light and happiness and knowledge and like that's probably just coming from my own anxieties being quelled that I've lived in. But when you really get down to brass tacks, like this is the actual nuts and bolts of what the religion is.
That's to me
is what's rough.
100%. I think I couldn't agree more with like the having kids, especially when so many people are like, oh, becoming a parent changes your perception of God because now you know how he like looks at us. Instantly changed it where I was like, God damn, how does he look at us like this when I look at my kid like this and it doesn't feel like he's looking at it the same way, sort of thing. And and like you said, absolutely, I think it would be one thing if it was the whole thing that people always say where it's like, well, that's just the culture. That's just the culture around it. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, no, it's also the core principles are also really difficult for me to like think of teaching a child that. Yeah. Like just watching James Acaster's new special, he's got this great bit where he talks about the most he cried was when he was 4 years old and he found out that his best friend, Jesus Christ, died. And he had never known that. And then he went to church and it was Easter and it finally clicked that the worship band was singing about how Jesus had died. And he was like, he's dead. And he started sobbing. And an old man came up and was like, what's wrong? And he was like, Jesus is dead. And this old man was like, no. He died for you. And he was like, I was involved in that sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, 100%. The core message of not all religion, but of Christianity is one of you are inherently bad. And there was one being that was supremely good. And because of your bad actions, he had to die. And that's on you. And I cannot imagine at all ever trying to convince my kid that he owed a debt to this being that loves him and yet he can't live up to. Like that is wild to me. Like it makes me genuinely sad to think of either of my boys living in that world where I'm like, that's just not what you need to think about. And then to be like, and now you're 8 years old, you need to like be baptized and like really commit, like all of that. I'm like, that's a core principle that is still bad. Yeah. And also the cultural thing doesn't make any sense anyway. That's my biggest beef when people always say that. And I'm like, what about Jesus saying you will know them by their fruits? Yeah. Isn't that what the fruits are? Yeah. So yeah, I did a live stream the other day and an active Mormon came in to the live stream. Yeah. Hi, Sophia, I think was her name. And she like came on and we like actually chatted voice. Cool. And I'm like, everyone be cool. I got a live one here. Like, cool. Everyone be nice. Don't spook them.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Sophia, you a little treat?
Yeah. And I'm like, wait, do that again for the camera.
Sophia, just a little treat.
And so I didn't know what her story was, but she just asked me this question that was like, it was so innocent. It was so sweet. And it was like, oh, girl, I could talk to you about this for hours. This is how she asked it. She said, didn't know who I was and just said, did you leave the church because of the culture was too judgmental? And I'm like, I don't even know how to answer it. I'm like, I left because the culture is too judgmental in a way where the culture is defined by a judgmental, vengeful God. Yeah. That I'm like, it's not people who would just want to point to like the cultural things. Yeah. Even Kwaku was sitting, Kwaku, he was sitting right in that chair and he was like so dismissive. I have a thorough interview with him too.
Of the culture?
Of saying that we have a problem with the culture and that people, he's like, everyone I know in Utah County, people are having sex and they get married. It's not a big deal, not a big deal. And my main argument is like, even if you don't think that's a big deal, do you still recognize that for a lot of people, their experience and the way they internalize the gospel, the way they were raised, they actually took the prophet's word seriously, like the, the religious OCD and stuff like that. Do you understand that's most people's experience? It stems from the scriptures, the teachings, the things from that. And it's like, yeah, well, those people are wrong. You're like, the culture of the church is we don't live in a culture where you can call out people like that in Sunday school and be like, actually, the way he just cited the Bible is wrong. Yeah. Like, that's a tough thing to do unless you're Dan McClellan.
Unless you're Dan McClellan. Yeah, it's always, I think it breaks down too much because, I mean, the whole thing that I had to teach on my mission was constantly like, do you remember how we used to have prophets and how they operated as like a mouthpiece of God? Have you ever wondered why God ever would stop that? He didn't, and he wouldn't. In fact, he restored his gospel through a prophet in these latter days, blah, 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 blah. And to me, it outright like dismisses all of that, where it turns it into, once again, like there's actually no point for a prophet. And then it's like, oh, okay, then we're Catholic again. Like, let's just go back to that. It sounds like they have a much better claim to that. Or if you're going to say that the Catholic Church had like a second falling away, then now you're Lutheran, I guess. Like, whatever you want to spin it, you just kind of undercut the whole sales point of your religion, which is that God needs to speak through his mouthpiece, which is that of the prophets. But it doesn't make sense no matter what, because I think most Christians agree that Jesus was a pretty good guy. And except
for all the socialism.
His views on rich people weren't actually real anyway. Man, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that anymore. Drove me up a wall hearing so many times the stretches people would make to say that gay people are bad. But the immediate dismissiveness of Jesus saying like 35 times, fuck the rich. And they're like, he didn't mean it. He didn't mean that. And when he said, give unto Caesar what is of Caesar, what he really meant was gay people are trying to destroy the family. That's how he actually meant. I'm like, I'm not piecing these puzzles together. How do you have this insane like string and picture poster over here for why God hates gay people? But then when Jesus is just like, fuck the rich, you're like, what could he mean by that? What do you think? We should have sex with the rich people? Is that what he meant? Like, it's just like the most bewildering thing.
Yeah, we got my journals out right now. I could explain it perfectly. I was one of those people, man. Don't Google my name before I'd left the church, because I have plenty of writings on the internet of how I pieced that shit together. And I thought I was really smart.
I think growing up poor did help me in that way, where I always was like, no, it does feel like Jesus hates rich people. And I'm pretty sure he does, because I hate rich people. So it was always nice. Where I was like, yeah, he gets it. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
I felt good about that piece.
It's called a DIY God.
Yeah.
Trademark that. It's just like whatever I think God thinks is probably what God thinks. Yeah. And let's not look into that anymore.
Yeah. But the cultural piece. So I was talking to a friend of mine one time, and she's a convert. She converted when she was like 18. And she was basically talking about how she still goes to church, doesn't take everything so seriously, people say sometimes, blah, 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 all that stuff. And she made the point as well, where she was just like, but that's the culture, and you can't judge the culture. And so I said, I think that can be a valid statement, but it is not one that I understand. And the reason is because I remember in my youth, there was a whole general conference talk where they talked about the quote from Jesus that said, by their fruits shall you know them, whatever the King James, these and thous go into that. But by their fruits you will know them. And I was like, so Jesus said that, and then the prophet had said that what was the fruit? It is the lives of our people. It is the way that the symbol of our religion is not the cross. It is the way in which the church conducts itself, and the way in which the members of the church conduct their lives as well. That is the evidence of the gospel. To me, that says that culture is important. Oh, I didn't say that it was a quote from Jesus, but I did say, what about by your fruits shall you know them? Because I was told that the fruits of the church is the way that the people conduct their lives. So what about that? And she responded, she said, well, I think first off, I don't know what you're talking about when you say by your fruits shall you know them. I don't know what that is. But I would probably just say like, yeah, I don't think that's totally true. I think, I don't know. It doesn't have to be the fruits. Like, you can still like know that it's a good gospel, even if people are bad without it. You don't need that. And I didn't I was just like, oh, okay, that's good to hear. But internally, I was like, that's crazy. You just dismissed the words of Christ instead. Like, isn't that like the main thing we're supposed to believe in?
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything against it, because I was like, I'm not here to take away your faith. you believe whatever you want. If you're able to take away like great things from this and dismiss the culture and like keep operating, I don't have anything better for you. So like you do whatever feels best for you, whatever the case is. But 100% internally, I was just like, this is wild times to me that so many people can take literally the words of Jesus and be like, nah, brah, that doesn't work with how I stay in. I would have, I was incapable of doing that. There's just, I don't feel like I'm as black and white of a person now, but for whatever reason in the church, I very much so was, where it was just like, but this is what it says. This is what it teaches. It must be, right? So anyway, that's my argument against culture.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Like,
here's the thing is we're actually very smart.
And when you really think about it, I mean, that always made sense to me that it's the same scripture in the Book of Mormon about planting a seed. Yeah. And if the seed grows, you should have gone with that one and she would have been on board.
A bad seed cannot bring forth a good tree. That just is impossible sort of thing. So it's wild to me. And I still understand the logic of it where it's like, so wait, are you saying that every person who comes out of something that's good must also be perfect? And it's like, no, clearly not. But weird that every Mormon I talk to ever is like, oh yeah, the church culture, generally not good. The church itself, absolutely a good tree. So the good tree just brought forth bad fruit, and that is not a problem. Like, feels like there's one important guy in history who would maybe disagree with that statement.
Yeah. Speaking of like the church culture and how it relates to like individualism and authenticity and stuff. Because for me, trying to be like a silly, funny girl within the church, similar to you being a silly, funny boy in the church, like there's certain aspects where the culture really supports that. But then there's certain times where, like you're saying on your mission, like you're going to have to shut down that part of yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a type of woman that is put on a pedestal, and a type of man too that's put on a pedestal.
Sure.
And it's about like a, I don't know, square peg round hole situation at the end of the day that I think kind of speaks to what your upbringing was of like how to fit yourself within this and actually feel God's love while also living in rebellion to what you feel like is your most authentic self
100%.
At the same time. Because, I just made a video, just a silly little TikTok where I was stitching my friend Alyssa Grenfell with the Relief Society voice. And there's a reason why so many people, when I talk like this, and that we have a certain voice, sisters. And it's the reason why it triggered so many people. It's because we know there's a certain, that to me is part of the culture that we can like satirize things so easily that are so triggering for people, because there's like a certain box of what people move up in the ladder of the church, and the more callings you get, the higher your family has like that Mormon stock, or just I was raised in Provo, so all I'm trying to say is like the more wealth you have, the higher family callings, the more you're related to general authorities and stuff, the more that the children within those families, and the more you go to school with those kinds of families, you see what the church produces and has always produced, and how you are different than those things. And how can I possibly feel like God loves me and I matter in his eyes and I fit within this church if I just don't fit that mold?
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I saw a Pinterest once. I mean, this is me ranting, where it was like, it was an article from like LDS Living. It was like, how to help your kids who don't fit the Mormon mold. And I thought it was really funny because the picture that they chose for that was a boy who looked brown, some kind of ethnicity, and he had just like a little bit longer hair. And that was like their example of like
I love
how
that.
to fit in.
What a like, obviously, like, because we're a little racist around these parts. That's so.
If you don't fit the Mormon mold, then you tell them that their ancestors were part of God's chosen people that turned away and are dark, and they can be part of the mold again if they repent. Like, I was just like, that's the funniest thing to choose. But like in their mind, like the way to be a little bit edgy is like have a 5 o'clock shadow, or not shave your legs at church,
which
the equivalent.
Shave your legs at church, right in the font. I think the whole like funny thing, like being funny. I didn't feel that as much, probably because I would imagine that you felt that more than me, just because There's not a space for funny women in the church. Whereas I had comedic genius John, by the way, the whole time that I was growing up, right? And so there was like a little more space for that sort of stuff. But I absolutely felt it with just being like poor and skateboarding and listening to punk rock music.
Sure.
100%, which was crazy to me because I think being in a convert family, I don't know if you ever felt this, because we didn't have generational like understanding of cultural things in the church, meant that there were some small things that I just didn't know or didn't understand because there was no one really to teach me. Like a real obvious example was the amount of talks I would always say, we need to go to the temple. You need to go to the temple monthly or weekly or whatever. I didn't know that meant you needed to perform things in the temple. I thought it was just you need to go to the temple because that's what they said. So I would literally, like, as a teenager, I would just drive to the temple once a week and I would just read my scriptures like in the lobby because we were all supposed to go to the temple, and that was it. And it's very stupid.
I have never heard that in my whole entire life. Wow.
It was dumb to take it so literally. I won't say that it was.
It's amazing you've become such a comedy genius, because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's very stupid. It's very stupid. But the only thing I knew is, well, I can only do baptisms for the dead, but I can only do that with my ward. I can't do that by myself. And my ward's not going to the temple every week. So it must be that we need to go to the temple because you feel the spirit there and blah, 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 and all this stuff. So I just go to the temple. And there was no one there to be like, no, you're supposed to like do these practices in the temple. It's not enough to just show up. Very stupid.
That's a great like life hack loophole though. Like, hey, Mormon teenagers, tell your parents you're going to the temple. You don't have to go in.
And then just derf in the parking lot, dude. Exactly. Do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Quaku here. It doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. There was a seminary booklet that I found that tracked the, like, how all the apostles and prophets were related to each other up until like Ezra Taft Benson, and how they were all like cousins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I remember opening that and just being like, oh no, I'm going to set that on the shelf. But I'm pretty sure this means I will never hold a leadership position in this church at all. Not that I needed to, but I felt like that was true. And then the more it opened my eyes, that I was like, oh yeah, even on like a micro level, living in Medford, Oregon, pretty weird that everybody who gets called to a position of authority is best friends with other people in positions of authority, or related to other people with positions of authority, or are related to people who can bring them out to Utah to like meet with people in positions of authority. Feels really weird that Revelation is only operating in a way that like cousins keep promoting each other.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's like an anti-Mormon pamphlet, basically. Like, don't let that get out.
Seriously.
Like, that would have put something on my shelf too.
It was shocking. And I remember I told people that and they're like, no, there's no way. And I was like, I mean, I can grab it for you if you want. And they're like, please don't. Like, sort of thing. But to me, that even more than like comedy stuff, I was just like, oh, I don't fit in here because as much as maybe the outward conversation is like, money is not evidence of righteousness. Clearly there's a cultural practice that like every mission president is like a fucking millionaire. Every stake president is like, generally speaking, wealthy for the most part, things like that. So it's like, I don't know that there's, anyway, it made me feel as if I'm like, wait a sec, where is the space here for people like me? I guess it's just to make other people feel good when they perform charity towards me. Like, is that my space in the kingdom of God? So yeah, I think those aspects of my personality were really what highlighted like square peg in a round hole. You don't, your parents aren't of the tax bracket to really teach other people about Christ's love. Sort of vibes. Yeah. Very similar to my upbringing too. Oh, really?
My parents, my dad's a truck driver. My
dad's a truck driver.
Oh my God, look at us.
Look at us.
How many bankruptcies have your parents had?
I think just one.
Two. Sucker.
It might be two, but
Mom's going to kill me for saying that, but I love like having a working class background and stuff, because I went to like a wealthy high school in Provo and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, when you mix different types of,
Nice.
Yeah. So when you mix different types of tax brackets in the same neighborhood, and you can see the ways that people Mormon very differently.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about the church, though, I wanted to ask if you felt like this too, is since my parents are converts.
Yeah.
please no one tell my parents that this is the way that I view their religion. But this is how I make sense of it in the best faith interpretation possible. That like the situations in which like my mom and dad came from that were really, anyone could say, are like really traumatizing and unhealthy before they converted to the church. And that it's like a level up for them. And I'm not going to sit there and like judge that they shouldn't have done that. I don't know how else I would have done anything differently. And like they saw a community and that gave them something to look forward to, an eternal family, some more structure. And I'm like, who wouldn't want that? Like cults only work because they provide something for people. And like that totally makes sense. But one thing I always think is kind of funny is like speaking of ChatGPT, I have had to come to like real terms with like, I'm white trash. Like if I am feeling like I am wishing for something that is right out of my reach, it's because the church put me in proximity to people that just have better educations than I have, that probably have better genetics than I have in some ways, that like I've just been surrounded by very like high achieving people that me and my podunk family just got plopped in the middle of. And like a lot of my anxieties are like, we kind of don't belong here. And that's like the anxiety that you're describing is like, that's part of the problems with the culture. But at the same time, it's also given my family like a level up and access to people. And just the same way that you want like third spaces, where else are you going to have a lot of people assigned to minister to each other in a place? So it's like, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. That's like my healthiest, like most nuanced perspective on it is like, it just has given me a proximity to people, and there's anxieties and problems and judgments that come with that. But also, where in the world, my dad wears a MAGA hat every single day since 2016.
Jeez.
My dad dropped out of high school in 10th grade and started shooting up drugs for the next few years. He like
like Donald Trump.
Following in his footsteps.
Man of the people. Man of the people. Same.
Yeah. Like where else would people like my dad be able to, rub shoulders and talk 100%. And have friendships with people who did go to college and did, well in business, and like overall that gave me, I can't imagine like a healthier childhood that I personally had, given all of the problems and all of the conditioning and the things that Mormonism does teach me. I'm like, where else would I have been able to be around those types of people? So I'm wondering if you feel the same way 100%. Or,
I think it's, it's tough because I do feel like when you leave, and this stands for like a lot of organizations, right? Where it's like, I find that there are bad things in this organization, and I wish there were other organizations that could easily exist that could provide that without the bad parts of that organization. So I think it's 100% true. I find myself thinking things where I'm like, oh yeah, being in this church absolutely gave me access to certain things. At the same time, God, wouldn't it be better if there was like some organization that could have done that? Like there used to be a lot more. Like my dad was part of Kiwanis Club, for instance, when I was growing up, but Kiwanis Club is a percentage of the size as it used to be in like the 80s, as far as I'm aware, or like Elks Lodge or any of those like organizations that were pseudo-religious, but mostly secular to like bring communities together. They don't really exist as much, like a lot of them. So anyway, I always get pulled in these two different directions where I'm like, where would I have learned that? But then I try to remind myself as well, where I'm like, but there is a way for us to have those things without all that baggage stuff. But anyway, going back to just kind of the question of like, did I feel that? Absolutely. I especially felt that as like a poor kid growing up in Medford. Like Medford, Oregon, when we first moved there, we lived like across the street from two meth houses. One of the kids I skateboarded with just next door, his dad was a drug dealer, like all this sort of stuff, right? And it was jarring for me to realize that when I went to school, all my friends who I skateboarded with, who were, I would say, as smart as me, a lot of them, some more so, some less, like we were all just kids, right? When we went to school, all of them who were mostly they were mostly not white. I was like it was like half and half split, but I was a white Mormon kid who went to school and then would go to like all the honors classes, and they would all go to these like remedial classes, even though a lot of them were like pretty smart as well. And I don't think they necessarily needed to be there for the most part. But next door neighbor kid was a black kid with a dad who was a drug dealer. So he gets to go to the remedial class. I'm like, Kevin's super smart. His dad's super smart. He's an entrepreneur if you look at it in a different direction. Like, they're smart, but why am I going here and why are they going there? And I think Mormonism absolutely contributed to it, because it was difficult to find too many Mormon kids in the remedial classes, but a lot of them were in the high achieving honors classes. You know what I mean? And I still remember my senior year, my one of my favorite teachers was my English teacher. I have severe doubts that I was one of her favorite students, but she was my favorite teacher. And she was also my junior year English teacher. So she knew me pretty well between years. And I felt like I saw something click for her. At the end of senior year, when we were all going through, she had this map on the wall where she was like, where is everybody going after graduation? Where are you going to college? All this stuff. And she just like put pins in the walls for where everyone was going to college. And I was the only kid without a pin anywhere. And she was like, when are you applying to colleges? And I was like, I don't know what that means. And she was like, you have to like submit to like colleges, right? And I was like, do you? And she's like, yeah, you have to like ask. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. How do I do that? And she was like, you can like get packets if you want to go talk to like the office. And I was like, oh, that's like a lot of work. She's like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know, serve a mission and die there, hopefully. Like, I don't know.
So lucky I got married. I was like, all I have to do is just find someone to marry me. That's all I needed to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I genuinely didn't understand. And I remember her as well. She was like, so have you taken the SAT yet? And I was like, I heard that thing was like racist, right? And she was like, oh, there's like biases towards different groups. I was like, well, I don't want to support anything that's racist. And she was like, how are you going to get into college? And I was like, do you need it? She's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, crazy. Like, I didn't know shit because no one had gone to college that I like knew.
Check out this Ollie, though.
Check out this Ollie. And it was so crazy for her, God. I think, where she finally realized, like, this is a kid who's getting A's in my classes, who has always been a little disruptive, but clearly a little clueless about like some stuff. And I think it like finally clicked in that moment where she was just like, where are you from? Like, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, I live like over there. And I felt like I could see it click in her mind where she was like, oh, you don't have anything. Like, you don't have the tutors and all this stuff. And I remember also telling her after that, I was like falling asleep in class and she was like, you need to stay awake in my class. And I'm like, sorry, I was working until midnight. I had the midnight shift last night. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I work at Cold Stone Creamery. And it was a big day. So I worked till 11. Then I had to clean up till 12. And then I had to come to your class, which starts at 6:15 in the morning and stuff. So I'm just really tired. And she was like, okay. And it was so interesting now in retrospect that I'm like, oh, now I understand why she was asking these questions, is because she was like, wait a sec, why your dad's not a doctor? Like, you're not, what's going on, sort of thing. And really it was just, I had no concept of like what it meant to go to college, what it meant to live with money, any of that sort of stuff. The only reason and then come back to the Mormon thing, the only reason I did go to college is because the one thing I knew about BYU, besides being like Mormon University, was that it was cheap. And what I'd always heard from people about college was it's expensive. You're going to go into debt. Hearing about debt, I mean, I was concerned. I'm sure you were this way as well. Every poor kid like is hyper aware of how much everything costs and like how much money their family doesn't have. So hearing like college is expensive, I mean, it was like, oh, so it's not for me.
Yeah.
Got it.
Same.
It's the same reason I don't buy Pokemon cards. I find them on the street. Every Pokemon card I have in this box, I found somewhere. We don't buy Pokemon cards. Why? Because they're expensive. Same reason I don't eat Captain Crunch. Why? It's name brand. It's expensive.
Literally about to say Golden Grams. I was like, when my friends had Golden Grams or like sugar cereal at their house, that was like not for sustenance reasons. It was like a treat. Nope. It's like, wow, luxury. Yeah.
Oh, like, for me, it was like, oh, we have cereal because guess what? We were delivering newspapers as a family, and it turns out they had the Atlantis cereal came out as like a free taste test. And so with every newspaper, so we've got a bunch of boxes of Atlantis Disney cereal now. We're living the good life, guys.
Don't get used to it.
Don't get
used
to
trial.
These 70 boxes of cereals will run out eventually that we swiped. But yeah, the only reason I went is because I'd heard it was cheap and like affordable at BYU. So I was like, oh, I guess it could be there. And then my sister, who did go to college at BYU for like a semester or two, she kind of knew that I wasn't planning on going, but she is amazing and has always been incredibly supportive of everything I do. And so she was the one who was like, but you need to go to college. You will like it. You will do well. You need this. Mm-hmm. And so she actually applied to all 3 BYUs on my behalf because I was just on my mission. And I think I even wrote her, and she was like, what are you planning on doing when you come back? And I was like, to tell you the truth, I thought I was going to die on my mission. Like, I thought that was my lot in life. So I never planned for anything more. I got a
2-year plan.
Literally. That's it. Like, I'll get my associates on the mission and die. My gosh. And so the only reason I went was because she applied. And the only reason that I like let her apply for me is because I was like, oh, this won't give me crippling debt. Okay, then sure, I guess I can try it out for whatever college is for. Like, I just didn't know. Mm-hmm. But it all came back to that. I would not have known if I wasn't Mormon and wasn't hanging out at church where half of the group were dentists and the other half were podiatrists for some reason in Medford. Every foot doctor is Mormon in Medford. I don't understand it. But anyway, so sitting in that environment and hearing about their degrees and like what it did for their families, and then knowing that college could be a good thing for people and wasn't just like a way to get indebted as a poor person and blah, 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 blah. That was the only reason why I was like, sure, I guess I could go to college. Mm-hmm. Like otherwise I would just come back and I would have been like, yeah, I had a 3.8 GPA in high school, and now I'm working at the gas station because what else do you do? Mm-hmm. I don't know how to do that shit.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
That could totally be the track that a lot of people who have your same kind of life, but just their parents didn't convert to the church. Yeah. Just like an alternate reality Adam would have lived. So you grew up as a poor kid and you thought the way to make a lot of money was get into the arts. Ugh. What a genius you really are.
Weirdly, it's worked out. Yeah. I mean, I got my MBA from BYU, and I did like the whole corporate thing. I make more money doing writing and stuff than I ever made doing corporate HR. So at least there's that, which is nice. That being said, anybody watching this, please come to a show. I need money. I still am in need of money. Yeah. I would like to completely transfer to the arts so I don't have to keep writing ad stuff, but
so I can just hear a comment section be like, have you made it if I haven't heard of you?
Oh, yeah. So. And the answer is no. Please come to a show.
Exactly. Link down below, you guys. Adam Broud, where can people find you? Where can they follow you and support you? Leave all of your information into the microphone right now.
Adam Broud on every single platform. That's it. At Adam Broud. And then if you want to follow Comedy Church, at Comedy Church SLC on Instagram and on TikTok. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's genuinely, like, people are always looking for fun things to do. Like, oh, there's a concert or there's this or that. Since I've been going to more comedy shows, especially, I'm like, literally, that's the thing to do. If you're looking for anything to do, look up a local comedy show, especially the ones that Adam is doing. Comedy Church is such a good time.
I've been a part of many comedy shows that when people are like, nice, I'll come. I'm like, don't bother. Like, there's a lot of bad things out there. But Comedy Church, I am legitimately proud of. It's a super fun time. It's a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Had the blast of my life this last week. So
every night at Comedy Church is Gay and Ladies Night. Just want to throw that out there. Every night.
Woo! Why not? You guys heard it here.
That's the pandering that I'm adding to it instead.
Where it's not exclusive. Yeah. But there's also no stripping, so maybe it won't be that popular.
Yeah. We do have a sex show, but no stripping.
Say that at the beginning of the podcast, Adam. Don't you know how to front load?
That's true.
Well, okay. With that, you got lots of shows going around town. Everyone, please go check out Adam. He's so funny. You do lots of stuff with Improv Broadway. You do improv shows sometimes too. So
like once a month I do with Improv Broadway, and that's a great show too. Yeah.
If you guys follow like Zach and Shay, who have a bajillion followers on TikTok.
Yeah. Yep.
So
they're so good.
Yeah. Absolutely, in good company with other amazing, genius, talented.
There's a lot of really good comedy in Utah. I think there's so many people who don't realize how good the comedy scene is in Utah. Like, legitimately.
That's why I've stayed out of it. I can't compete.
Whatever.
What's nice about podcasting is I think that I'm funny sometimes, but there's no like audience laughing or not laughing. It's just always silent. I prefer it that way. So podcasting might be where I'll stay, but I am trying to do more stand-up comedy shows.
I believe in you.
I
do.
Thank you. Adam's been a nice mentor, you could say. So
you probably couldn't. I don't think you can. I think it's mostly just you sending things and being like, this sucks, right? And I'm like, no, this is good. This is good. Tweak this.
The first joke I wrote, Adam said, so you wrote a joke. I was like, listen, I just got to get some stuff out of my system. So thankful that you joined us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this new season of my podcast, everybody. You can listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, iTunes. I also have a Patreon. It's really helpful to be doing my Timmy Did What podcast on the side, and then also have support for the Patreon for doing stuff for this channel. So if you want to support this and keep this podcast going, the only way I can do it is with donations and with Patreon. So links down below are available to click on and send your money my way. So I appreciate each and every one of you in your own beautiful, individual, wonderful ways. Like I always say, don't let someone else ruin your life for you. You ruin it for yourself.
I love that. That's so fun.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.